The wind cuts like a blade across the vast emptiness of the plains, honed sharp by 1,000 miles of frozen, unforgiving land. It finds every crack in the old barn's timbers, howling with the voice of a predatory beast. The year is 1934, and the Great Plains have become a wasteland of dust and broken dreams. A marmalade cat sits motionless on the porch of a weathered farmhouse. Unlike the other farms for miles around, this one still shows signs of life. Patches of green, defying the brown desolation that stretches to the horizon. The cat's gaze is fixed on the barn, unblinking and intent, as it has been for 3 nights running. Inside the farmhouse, retired Lieutenant Matthew Hargrove studies the cat through the window. 20 years have passed since the mud and blood of the Western Front, but the nightmares still come. His weathered face reflects in the glass eyes the color of a winter sky scanning the darkening landscape. From a drawer, he removes a Colt M1911, the same pistol that kept him alive in France. Its weight is familiar in his hand. "What do you see out there, Rusty Tom?" he murmurs, loading the gun with practiced precision. As twilight surrenders to darkness, Matthew steps onto his porch, the boards creaking beneath his boots. A wall of black clouds looms on the horizon. Another dust storm approaching. He adjusts the bandana around his neck, ready to pull it over his nose and mouth. The cat rises, stretches, and leads the way toward the barn, its tail held high like a signal flag. What Matthew discovers inside will not only change the fate of his struggling farm, but unearth one of America's best-kept military secrets, buried beneath the dust and desperation of the nation's darkest hour. The great barn doors groan on rusted hinges as Matthew pushes them apart just enough to slip inside. The beam of his kerosene lantern cuts through the darkness, throwing long shadows across abandoned farm equipment and empty stalls. Rusty darts ahead, disappearing into the gloom, then reappears at the entrance to the last stall, sitting and washing his face with deliberate nonchalance. Matthew approaches slowly, the floorboards protesting beneath his weight. The smell of dust and old hay fills his nostrils. And something else, something human. He raises the lantern higher, its circle of light falling across a makeshift nest of straw in the corner of the stall. A pair of eyes reflect the lantern light, wide with terror, belonging to a woman huddled against the wall. She's thin to the point of gauntness, her face smudged with dirt, dark hair tangled around hollow cheeks. She flinches from the light, pulling deeper into the shadows. "Don't shoot," she whispers, her voice cracked from disuse. "Please." Matthew lowers the lantern slightly, studying her. She's young, 30 at most, but with the weathered look that the Great Plains bestows upon all who dare to call it home. Her clothes are threadbare, but once were of good quality. "I'm not going to shoot you," he says, his voice low and even. "How long have you been in here?" 3 days, she answers, her eyes darting to the door behind him, measuring escape. Matthew nods once, then turns his broad back to her and walks toward the barn doors. He can feel her confusion, her suspicion at this unexpected reaction. At the entrance, he pauses without looking back. "Stay if you need to. Storm's coming anyway." He returns to the farmhouse, the cat trotting at his heels. Inside, he moves with purpose, ladling thick stew into a bowl, cutting a chunk of bread, filling a tin cup with water. He adds a woolen blanket to the bundle, faded but clean, and returns to the barn. The wind has picked up, driving the first particles of dust before it, like scouts for the approaching army of the storm. Inside the barn, he places the offerings on an upturned crate near the woman's stall, then retreats to the far wall where he sits on a bale of hay, the lantern between them casting its warm glow. "Eat," he says simply. She doesn't move at first, watching him with the wariness of a cornered animal. When he makes no move toward her, she edges forward on her hands and knees, never taking her eyes off him. She seizes the bowl and retreats to her corner, eating with desperate speed. "Slower," he advises. "It's been a while since you've had a proper meal." The woman pauses, forcing herself to take smaller bites. As the warmth of the food spreads through her, her shoulders relax fractionally. "My name is Sarah," she says finally. "Sarah Caldwell." Matthew Hargrove. He doesn't ask why she's hiding in his barn. Some questions answer themselves in time. "You're not going to turn me out." Her voice holds a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Not in a dust storm." He nods toward the door, where the wind now howls with increased fury. "And not at all if you don't give me reason to." Sarah wraps the blanket around her shoulders, its warmth a forgotten luxury. "I can work," she offers quickly. I'm stronger than I look. We'll see about that tomorrow. Matthew rises, taking the lantern with him. Bar the door from inside when I leave. The storm will be on us within the hour. Mr. Hargrove, she calls as he reaches the door. Thank you. He acknowledges her words with a slight nod, then slips out into the gathering maelstrom, leaving her with the food, the blanket, and the marmalade cat, who has decided to remain behind, curled contentedly in the straw. The following morning breaks clear and cold, the air temporarily scrubbed clean by the passage of the storm. Matthew works methodically, clearing the latest layer of dust from his porch and walkways. It's a Sisyphean task, but one he performs with grim determination each day. Rusty watches from a fence post, having returned to the house sometime during the night. The barn door opens, and Sarah emerges, squinting in the harsh sunlight. She's attempted to tidy herself, her hair pulled back, face washed, but her clothes remain dirty and worn. She approaches Matthew hesitantly. I meant what I said about working, she says, standing straight despite her obvious weakness. I won't be Charity. Matthew considers her for a long moment, then points to a hand pump near the house. Pump needs priming. 2 buckets to start, one for the kitchen, one for the chickens. Handle sticks when it's been dry. Sarah nods, grateful for the clear instruction in the absence of questions. She finds the buckets hanging nearby and sets to work. The pump handle indeed sticks, requiring more strength than her starved body possesses. Matthew watches her struggle for a moment, then approaches. Like this, he demonstrates, using his weight rather than just arm strength. Let gravity help. Water gushes forth cold and clear, a miracle in itself during these dust-choked times. Sarah's eyes widen slightly at the sight. You've got water when half the county's gone dry. Dug the well deeper last year, Matthew replies, stepping back to let her take over. Most folks won't go past 40 feet. How deep did you go? 120. Sarah looks at him with new respect. A 120-foot well dug by hand is no small feat, especially for what appears to be a one-man operation. You've been here a while then. 10 years. Matthew turns toward the house. Breakfast in 20 minutes. Then we'll see what else you can do. Over a simple meal of corn porridge and coffee, Sarah gradually reveals her story, careful to keep the emotion from her voice. My husband Robert and I had a farm about 60 miles east. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Or so we thought. She stares into her coffee cup. The bank thought differently. Robert took sick last winter. Dust pneumonia. By spring, he was gone. Her knuckles whiten around the cup. The bank man came the day after the funeral. Said we were 3 payments behind. Matthew listens without comment, his face impassive. I tried to keep up with the work, but she trails off, not needing to explain how impossible that task would have been for a lone woman. When they posted the eviction notice, I just walked away. Took what I could carry. The bank man, Matthew says his first question. Name was Fletcher. Sarah looks up sharply. Yes, Warren Fletcher. You know him. He's been sniffing around my place too. Matthew's expression darkens momentarily. Times are hard. Banks are taking land anywhere they can get it. After breakfast, Matthew shows Sarah around the farm, a modest operation but remarkably viable given the circumstances that have driven most neighboring farms to ruin. Where other fields lie barren under drifting dunes of dust, Matthews shows strips of green, hardy wheat and barley growing in patterns Sarah hasn't seen before. You're planting in furrows, she asks, studying the technique. Keeps the wind from scouring the seedlings, Matthew explains. And that, he points to rows of tall grasses planted as windbreaks, slows the dust. My husband tried windbreaks. They died. Depends on what you plant and how. These are switchgrass. Roots go down 15 feet. Throughout the day, Matthew assigns Sarah simple tasks. Gathering eggs, feeding chickens, weeding the kitchen garden, protected by a makeshift fence of salvaged wood and wire. He watches her work, measuring her worth not in words but in silent assessment. By evening, Sarah's muscles scream in protest, her soft hands blistered from unaccustomed labor. Matthew notices her wincing as she washes up for dinner. Medicine cabinet in the washroom, he says. Salve for those blisters. The farmhouse is sparsely furnished but meticulously maintained. No dust gathers in corners, no cobwebs hang from ceilings. It speaks of a man with military precision and few distractions. The main room serves as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a solid oak table in the center. Two doors lead off to what Sarah assumes are bedrooms, though one remains firmly closed at all times. As days pass, Sarah's strength returns. The routine of farm work provides structure to her shattered life. She rises before dawn, helps with morning chores, learns the rhythm of Matthew's methodical existence. They speak little, but the silence grows comfortable rather than strained. On her fifth day while sweeping the main room, Sarah notices something unusual. A floorboard near the fireplace shifts slightly under her broom. Curious, she kneels down, finding the board loose. Glancing toward the door to ensure Matthew is still outside with the livestock, she carefully lifts the board. Beneath lies a small cavity containing a leather-bound journal, its cover worn smooth with handling. She hesitates, conscience warring with curiosity, before carefully lifting it out. The journal opens to reveal not the personal thoughts she expected, but pages of precise diagrams, mathematical formulas, and notes written in a shorthand she doesn't recognize. Interspersed among these are maps with locations marked by cryptic symbols. At the top of several pages, a header reads, Project Pegasus, Phase 2. The sound of boots on the porch sends her scrambling to return the journal and replace the floorboard. When Matthew enters, she's sweeping industriously, her heart pounding in her chest. That night, after Matthew retires to his bedroom, Sarah remains at the table mending a tear in one of her dresses by lamplight. Rusty curls in her lap, purring contentedly. The cat has adopted her, completely following her throughout her daily tasks. A sudden noise from Matthew's room draws her attention, a cry quickly stifled. She freezes, listening. The sounds of restless movement continue, punctuated by murmured words she can't quite catch. Nightmares, she realizes, like the ones that plagued Robert in his final months. In the morning, Matthew appears haggard, dark circles under his eyes. They work side by side in the vegetated garden, the silence between them heavier than usual. You fought in the war, Sarah finally asks, keeping her tone casual as she pulls weeds. Matthew's hands pause momentarily in their work. Yes. My father, too, never came home. She doesn't look up. Robert, my husband, was too young. Always felt he'd missed something important. He didn't miss anything worth having. Matthew's voice is flat, closing the subject. Later that afternoon, while hanging laundry on the line, Sarah spots a cloud of dust approaching along the road, a motorcar unusual in these parts where few can afford the luxury. She watches as it grows closer, eventually resolving into a black Ford sedan that pulls up beside the house. Matthew emerges from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, his posture changing subtly, more alert, shoulders squared. Sarah recognizes the defensive stance of a man preparing for confrontation. The car door opens and a man steps out, well-dressed in a suit that looks expensive, even covered with a fine layer of dust from the road. He's in his 40s, handsome in a manufactured way, with brilliantine hair and a practiced smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Hargrove, he calls, approaching with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. Good to see you again. Fletcher, Matthew's response is curt. Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Warren Fletcher brushes dust from his sleeve with manicured fingers. Bank's concerns don't operate on your schedule, I'm afraid. His gaze slides to Sarah and a flash of recognition crosses his face. Well, well, Mrs. Caldwell, isn't it? What a surprise finding you here. Sarah feels ice form in her stomach. She nods stiffly, but says nothing. You two know each other, Matthew asks, looking between them. Oh yes, Fletcher smiles. Mrs. Caldwell and I had some business regarding her late husband's property. Business that remains unfinished, I might add. She works for me now. Matthew states, his tone brooking no argument. Whatever business you had with her before is done. Fletcher raises an eyebrow. Is that so? Well, that complicates matters slightly. He turns back to Matthew. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. Bank matters, you understand. Matthew glances at Sarah. Finish with the laundry, he says, then check the chicken coop for holes. Weasel got in last night. She recognizes the dismissal, reluctantly returning to her task as the men walk toward the house. Through the open windows, she catches fragments of their conversation. Fletcher's smooth, persuasive tone contrasting with Matthew's terse responses. Mortgage payments. Not due for another month. Circumstances have changed. Drought conditions, special considerations for veterans. When they emerge 30 minutes later, Matthew's face is granite hard, Fletcher's smugly satisfied. The banker pauses beside his car, donning driving gloves with deliberate precision. I'll be back next week, Hargrove. Have your answer by then. His eyes find Sarah again. And Mrs. Caldwell, do remember that abandoning a property doesn't absolve debt. We'll need to discuss that matter as well. After Fletcher's car disappears in a cloud of dust, Sarah approaches Matthew, who stands staring down the empty road. What did he want? What they always want: land. Matthew turns toward the barn. Come on, that weasel hole won't fix itself. As they work together repairing the chicken coop, Sarah finally broaches the subject again. Is the farm in trouble? Matthew hammers a nail with more force than necessary. Fletcher says the bank's reassessing all mortgages in the county. Drought conditions mean property values have dropped. They want more collateral or immediate payment. Can they do that? They've got the paper. They can do what they want. He selects another nail. Been happening all over. Bank forecloses, then sells to big agricultural companies for pennies on the dollar. What will you do? Fight it. He meets her eyes directly. This land stays mine. That evening, as darkness settles over the farm, Sarah helps Matthew secure the homestead against another approaching dust storm. They close shutters, stuff rags under doors, cover the well. The routine is familiar now, performed with grim efficiency. In the fading light, Sarah notices something she hadn't before. A small shed behind the barn, padlocked and secure. Unlike the other outbuildings, this one has no gaps or cracks where dust might penetrate. What's in there? She asks, nodding toward it. Storage, Matthew replies without elaboration. Come on, we need to get the animals secured. The storm hits just after midnight, a howling black blizzard that transforms day into night. Inside the farmhouse, lamps burn behind covered windows as Sarah and Matthew sit at the table drinking coffee and listening to the wind's assault. How do you do it? She asks suddenly. Keep going when everything's dying around you. Matthew's weathered face is contemplative in the lamplight. You find something worth fighting for. Then you fight. And what are you fighting for, Mr. Hargrove? He doesn't answer immediately, studying the coffee in his cup as if it might contain wisdom. The future, he says finally. Not mine, but someone's. The cryptic answer hangs in the air between them. Sarah thinks of the hidden journal, the strange diagrams, the locked shed, pieces of a puzzle she can't yet assemble. Later, alone in the small room Matthew has given her, once a study now converted to simple sleeping quarters, Sarah contemplates her situation. A week ago, she was homeless, hopeless, facing a future of destitution or worse. Now she has shelter, purpose, even if temporary. Yet questions multiply. Why is Matthew's farm thriving when others fail? What secrets does he keep beneath floorboards and behind locked doors? And why does Fletcher's interest seem to extend beyond simple banking concerns? Sleep eludes her as the storm rages outside. On impulse, she retrieves a small locket from her meager possessions, the last gift from Robert before his death. Inside is not a photograph as one might expect, but a small folded paper. She opens it carefully, revealing a letter written in Robert's precise hand. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then my fears have proven justified. The information I've uncovered is more dangerous than I initially believed. They are watching me. I don't know who to trust anymore, except perhaps MH, if I can reach him in time. What began as research into drought-resistant crops has become something else entirely. Something the government wants buried along with anyone who knows about it. If anything happens to me, find Matthew Hargrove. He was part of it once before he saw the truth. He'll know what to do. All my love. Robert. Sarah stares at the letter, her hands trembling. M.H. Matthew Hargrove, the man whose barn she had chosen by blind chance. Or perhaps not chance at all. Robert had known him, had intended to seek him out. And Robert's death, the illness that had taken him so quickly, had it truly been dust pneumonia, or something more sinister? Dawn finds Sarah still awake, the letter hidden once more in her locket. The storm has passed, leaving a fresh layer of dust over everything despite their precautions. As she helps Matthew clear paths to the outbuildings, her mind races with questions she dares not ask. You're quiet today, Matthew observes as they work. Just tired. The storm kept me awake. He nods, accepting her explanation without comment. They fall into the day's routine, feeding animals, checking crops, repairing storm damage. By afternoon, Sarah has nearly convinced herself that Robert's letter was merely the paranoid ramblings of a dying man. Then she finds the photograph. It's tucked inside a book in Matthew's sparse collection, a technical manual on irrigation systems, a black and white image of younger men in uniform standing before a nondescript building. Matthew is easily recognizable among them, his posture military straight. On the back, written in faded ink, Project Pegasus Team 1918, U.S. Army Intelligence Corps. She barely has time to return the photograph to its hiding place before Matthew enters carrying a toolbox. Need help in the north field, he says. Windbreak took damage. Sarah follows him outside, her mind spinning with this new information. Army Intelligence, Project Pegasus, the same name from the hidden journal. Robert's letter suddenly seems less like paranoia and more like warning. They work side by side repairing the windbreak, rows of tall grasses that protect the crops from the relentless plains wind. Matthew works methodically, his movements efficient. These plants, Sarah says, examining them closely, I've never seen anything quite like them. Specialized hybrid, Matthew replies, developed during the war. For farming, a shadow crosses his face, originally for other purposes, found better uses for them after. They're remarkable, the way they've survived when everything else is dying. Matthew straightens, fixing her with a penetrating gaze. Some things are built to endure. Question is whether they should. The cryptic statement hangs between them. Sarah decides to risk a more direct approach. Did you serve with a man named Robert Caldwell, my husband? Matthew's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or wariness. Name's not familiar. He mentioned you in his letters, said you were involved in agricultural research. Did a lot of things during the war. Don't recall everyone I worked with. He turns back to the windbreak. These roots need water. Fetch 2 buckets from the well. The abrupt change of subject tells Sarah more than a direct answer might have. He's hiding something, and it involves her husband. As she walks toward the well, the sound of an approaching vehicle catches her attention. Not the smooth purr of Fletcher's Ford, but the labored rattle of an older truck. She turns to see a dusty pickup pulling into the yard. Matthew emerges from the field, tensing slightly until he recognizes the vehicle. The truck stops and an elderly man climbs out. Rail-thin, weathered like old leather, with sharp eyes that miss nothing. Doc Miller. Matthew greets him with a nod. Didn't expect you today. Thought I'd check those seed samples, the old man replies, retrieving a battered medical bag from the truck. Storm didn't damage the shed, did it? Sealed tight as always. The old man notices Sarah for the first time, his eyebrows rising slightly. And who might this be? Sarah Caldwell, Matthew answers before she can speak. Helping out around the place. Caldwell, Doc Miller looks at her more closely. Any relation to Robert Caldwell from over Dalhart Way? My husband, Sarah confirms. He passed last winter. Sorry to hear that. Fine man, Robert. Sharp mind. The doctor's gaze shifts to Matthew, something unspoken passing between them. Well, no sense standing around. Let's check those samples. The 2 men head toward the locked shed behind the barn, leaving Sarah to continue her work. She watches them unlock the door and disappear inside their manner, suggesting routine, but their body language tense with unspoken significance. That evening, Doc Miller stays for dinner. A simple affair of beans, cornbread, and coffee. The conversation remains casual, touching on weather, local news, and farming techniques. Yet beneath the mundane exchange, Sarah senses currents of deeper meaning. Crop projections for the county are grim, Miller comments, buttering his cornbread. Governor's talking about federal relief, but Washington moves slow. Always does, Matthew agrees. How bad? 30% yield at best. Except for the Pearson place. They're trying your methods. Might get 60%. Matthew nods satisfaction, briefly softening his features. Good. Should have more data on the new hybrid by harvest time. Speaking of data, Miller says, glancing at Sarah, perhaps we should discuss the technical aspects after dinner. Matthew follows his gaze. Mrs. Caldwell has proven herself trustworthy. The doctor looks surprised but nods slowly. Your call, Lieutenant. After the meal, they gather around the table with cups of coffee. Doc Miller produces a small notebook from his jacket pocket. Before we start, Matthew interrupts, turning to Sarah. What you're about to hear stays between us. Understood? She nods, heart quickening at the seriousness of his tone. Robert mentioned Project Pegasus to you, didn't he? Matthew asked directly. Startled by the sudden acknowledgement, Sarah can only nod again. I thought he might have. He was careful but worried about you. Matthew exchanges glances with Miller. I didn't know him during the war, but we met 2 years ago at an agricultural conference in Amarillo. He recognized my name from the project files. What exactly is Project Pegasus? Sarah asked, finding her voice. Miller leans forward. Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, it was one of the most advanced agricultural research programs ever conducted by the U.S. military. Agricultural research by the military. War isn't just about bullets and bombs. Mrs. Caldwell, Matthew explains, it's about food. Control the food supply, control the outcome. In 1917, when the U.S. entered the Great War, Miller continues, intelligence suggested the conflict might last another decade. The War Department feared a global food shortage that could determine the war's outcome. They assembled a team of the best minds in botany, chemistry, and agriculture. Project Pegasus, Sarah whispers. Its mandate was to develop crop strains that could grow in any condition. Drought, cold, poor soil. Plants that could feed an army when conventional agriculture failed. Matthew's voice grows distant, remembering. We succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. The hybrid strains they created, Miller adds, could grow with minimal water-resist disease and yield 3 times the normal harvest. That's remarkable, Sarah says. But why keep it secret? This could help so many people, especially now. A shadow crosses Matthew's face. Because the War Department saw other applications. Imagine crops that could be engineered not just to feed but to harm. Plants designed to target specific soil types, making enemy lands infertile for generations. Sarah recoils at the implication. Biological warfare. Precisely. Matthew's voice hardens. When the war ended, most of the team was reassigned. A few of us saw the direction things were heading and objected. We were encouraged to forget the project existed. But you didn't forget, Sarah guesses. I took samples. Matthew states this without apology. The beneficial strains only, drought-resistant, high-yield varieties. Been developing them ever since distributing seeds to local farmers who need them. Which is why his farm is the only one within 50 miles showing green, Miller interjects. And why the government wants him silenced, a new voice adds. They turn to find Fletcher standing in the doorway, a pistol held steadily in his hand. I must say, Hargrove, you make surveillance almost too easy. Fletcher steps fully into the room, closing the door behind him. Leaving windows open during sensitive conversations, careless for a former intelligence officer. Matthew rises slowly, positioning himself between Fletcher and the others. You're not from the bank. No more than you're a simple farmer. Fletcher smiles without warmth. Warren Fletcher, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been watching you for some time, Lieutenant Hargrove. You and your little seed distribution network. FBI, Sarah gasps. But why? Because our friend here stole classified military property, Fletcher interrupts. Seeds might seem harmless. This is Caldwell, but these represent millions in research and development. Property of the United States government. Property. Matthew's voice is dangerously quiet. These plants could save farms across the Dust Bowl. People are starving while Washington sits on technology that could help them. That's not your decision to make. Fletcher gestures with the gun. Where are the original samples, the Phase 3 specimens? Matthew remains silent, his face impassive. Your husband asked the same questions Mrs. Caldwell, Fletcher says, turning to Sarah, became quite the amateur investigator after meeting Hargrove. Unfortunate what happened to him. Cold realization washes over Sarah. You killed Robert. The official cause was dust pneumonia, I believe. Common enough these days. Fletcher's clinical tone makes the statement all the more chilling. Though perhaps his condition was accelerated. Rage flares in Sarah's eyes. She starts forward, only to be restrained by Matthew's outstretched arm. What do you want, Fletcher? Matthew asks, his voice controlled despite the tension visible in his jaw. What the Bureau has wanted for 2 years. Complete surrender of all Project Pegasus materials in your possession. Seeds, documentation, research notes. Everything. Fletcher gestures toward the door. We'll start with that locked shed behind your barn. Miller, who has remained silent during the confrontation, suddenly slumps forward onto the table, his breathing labored. "Doc." Matthew turns his attention to the old man. "What's wrong?" "Heart," Miller gasps, clutching his chest. "Medicine, in my bag." Fletcher waves the gun impatiently. "Get it for him, no sudden moves." As Matthew retrieves the doctor's bag from beside the door, Sarah moves to Miller's side, supporting him as he struggles for breath. Fletcher watches them momentarily distracted. It happens in an instant. Matthew swings the heavy medical bag in a wide arc, striking Fletcher's gun hand. The weapon discharges into the ceiling as Fletcher staggers backward. Matthew lunges forward, tackling the agent to the ground. The men grapple fiercely, each fighting for control of the gun. Sarah scrambles to help, grabbing a cast-iron skillet from the stove. As Fletcher gains the upper hand, pinning Matthew beneath him, Sarah brings the skillet down with all her strength against the back of Fletcher's head. The agent collapses unconscious. Miller straightens in his chair, his heart attack miraculously cured. "Nice work, both of you," he says calmly, retrieving a length of rope from a nearby shelf. "Let's secure our friend before he wakes up." As they bind Fletcher to a chair, Sarah stares at the two men in disbelief. "You knew he was following you." "Suspected it," Matthew replies, checking Fletcher's bindings. "Wasn't sure until he showed up at the door." "So the heart attack was—" "A diversion," Miller confirms without apology. "Old trick, but effective." With Fletcher secured, Matthew turns to Sarah, his expression grave. "Everything's changed now. You understand that?" She nods slowly, the full implications becoming clear. "They'll send others when he doesn't report back." "Yes." Matthew moves to the loose floorboard, retrieving the hidden journal and several other documents. "We need to move quickly. Doc, get the truck ready. We'll need to evacuate the seed vault." "What about him?" Sarah gestures toward the unconscious Fletcher. "We'll take him with us. He's our insurance policy." Matthew begins gathering essential supplies. "Sarah, there's a box under my bed. Military canvas green. Bring it here." As Sarah retrieves the box, her mind races with questions. Yet one certainty emerges from the chaos. Her seemingly random arrival at Matthew's farm was anything but chance. Robert had sent her here, his final act of protection, guiding her to the one place she might find both answers and allies. The box contains a military-issue Colt 1911, identical to Matthew's ammunition, and a set of identity papers with Matthew's photograph, but a different name. "Robert told me to find you," she says as she returns with the box. "In a letter he left. He knew they were after him. He contacted me a week before he died." Matthew confirms, checking the pistol. "Said he'd found evidence the government was reactivating Project Pegasus for military applications. He was going to send documentation, but it never arrived." Sarah reaches for her locket, opening it to remove the folded letter. "This is all I have. He must have hidden the rest." Matthew reads the letter quickly, his expression darkening. "If Fletcher knew about Robert's investigation, the evidence might still be at your farm. They would have searched it, but they don't know all of Robert's hiding places." Sarah finishes. "I do." "It's too dangerous," Miller objects. "They'll be watching the property." "It's our only chance," Matthew counters. "If we can prove the government is developing biological weapons in violation of the Geneva Protocol, we might have leverage." Fletcher stirs in his chair, groaning as he regains consciousness. His eyes focus slowly, then narrow with cold fury as he assesses his situation. "You've just graduated from theft to assaulting a federal agent," he says, testing his bonds. "That's 20 years minimum." "Considering the alternative, I'll take my chances," Matthew replies, checking the window for any sign of additional agents. "Your people killed an innocent man to protect a weapons program that violates international law." "Weapons program?" Fletcher looks genuinely confused. "What are you talking about, Hargrove?" "Project Pegasus," Matthew states. "The biological warfare application." "That's what this is all about, isn't it?" A strange expression crosses Fletcher's face, something between realization and alarm. "Is that what you think we're after, Christ? You really don't know?" "Know what?" Matthew demands. Fletcher studies him carefully before responding. "The Bureau doesn't give a damn about your drought-resistant seeds, Lieutenant. We're after the Phase 3 specimens, specifically the ones designed to extract uranium from soil." The revelation lands like a thunderbolt. Matthew exchanges shocked glances with Miller. "Uranium extraction was a theoretical application," Miller says slowly. We never developed it beyond initial testing. Well, someone continued your work, Fletcher replies grimly, and they're very interested in getting those specimens back, along with anyone who knows how to cultivate them. Who? Matthew presses. Who's behind this? Before Fletcher can answer, the sound of approaching vehicles cuts through the night, multiple engines growing louder by the second. That would be my backup, Fletcher says with grim satisfaction. I was due to check in an hour ago. Matthew moves quickly to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. Two black sedans approach along the road, dust billowing behind them. We're out of time, he announces, turning back to the room. Doc, get the truck around back. Sarah, grab only what you need. We leave in 2 minutes. As Miller hurries out, Matthew faces Sarah, his expression grave, yet somehow lighter than she's ever seen it, as if action has lifted a burden he has carried too long. Last chance to walk away, he tells her. Stay here, tell them I forced Doc to help me escape. You knew nothing. Sarah straightens, something of her husband's determination flaring in her eyes. They killed Robert. I'm seeing this through. Matthew nods once, a gesture of respect and acceptance. He turns to Fletcher, drawing a knife to cut the agent's bonds. You're coming with us, he informs the FBI man. Insurance. Fletcher's laugh holds no humor. They'll shoot through me to get to you if they have to. Then we'd better hope it doesn't come to that. Matthew frees Fletcher's hands but keeps the gun trained on him. Move. As they slip out the back door toward Miller's waiting truck, headlights illuminate the front of the farmhouse. Car doors slam, followed by authoritative voices calling Matthew's name. Sarah glances back at the home that briefly gave her shelter and purpose. Whatever comes next, there's no returning to the simple existence of the past week. She climbs into the truck beside Matthew, who keeps his gun pressed against Fletcher's side in the middle. The shed, Sarah suddenly remembers. The seed vault. Distributed most of it last month. Matthew replies, his eyes on the rearview mirror as Miller drives the truck slowly away from the house, lights off. What's left is here. He pats a canvas bag at his feet. The future and about 2 pounds of seeds. As the truck clears the farm's boundaries, shouts erupt behind them. They've been spotted. A gunshot cracks through the night, followed by the sound of cars being hastily turned around. Hold on, Miller warns, pressing the accelerator to the floor. The ancient truck surges forward, engine roaring in protest as they race into the darkness. Behind them, the pursuing give chase headlights, bobbing across the uneven landscape like predatory eyes. Ahead lies nothing but the vast emptiness of the Great Plains, shrouded in night and dust, a fitting battleground for the conflict to come. Sarah clutches her locket containing Robert's final message, its weight a reminder of all that's been lost and all that remains at stake. The wind through the truck's open window carries the gritty taste of dust and the promise of storms to come. But for the first time since Robert's death, she feels something long forgotten stirring within her. Hope. The truck bounces violently across the uneven terrain, its ancient suspension groaning in protest. Miller navigates by moonlight, staying off the main roads where Fletcher's colleagues would set up roadblocks. In the distance, the pursuing headlights weave through the darkness, sometimes disappearing behind hills, only to reappear with alarming proximity. Matthew keeps his gun trained on Fletcher, who sits in tense silence, occasionally glancing in the side mirror at the pursuing vehicles. The vastness of the Great Plains stretches around them, an ocean of land under a canopy of brilliant stars. In daylight, this landscape reveals the devastation of the Dust Bowl. At night, it offers the illusion of timelessness, as if the ecological disaster ravaging the Heartland were merely a passing dream. They're gaining, Miller announces, his weathered hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. This old truck can't outrun those government Fords. Matthew surveys the terrain ahead, making rapid calculations. Cut through Dawson's Creek bed. It's dry this time of year. We can lose them in the ravines. If we don't break an axle first, Miller mutters, but turns the truck sharply eastward. Fletcher laughs humorlessly. You think this is just about me and a few agents? When I don't report in, they'll have the state police looking for you, Army too, probably. Then we'd better make good use of our head start, Matthew replies, his voice steady. Sarah, check the map in the glove compartment. We need a route to your old farm that avoids main roads. Sarah unfolds the Warren County map, struggling to read it in the bouncing truck. There's a series of farm access roads that run parallel to Route 87. Not marked, but I know them. Robert used them to move equipment. The truck lurches down a steep embankment into the dried creek bed. Miller kills the headlights, navigating solely by moonlight as they drive along the sandy bottom. The pursuing cars momentarily disappear from view. "Your husband," Fletcher says, suddenly addressing Sarah. "He was smarter than most, figured out connections others missed." "What connections?" she demands, anger flaring at his casual mention of Robert. "Between Project Pegasus and something much bigger." Fletcher's expression is unreadable in the dim light. "Something even Hargrove here doesn't know about." "Shut up, Fletcher," Matthew warns, pressing the gun barrel more firmly against the agent's ribs. "Why they deserve to know what they're dying for." Fletcher turns to Sarah. "Did your husband ever mention the Manhattan Project?" The name means nothing to her, but Matthew's sharp intake of breath is telling. "That's just theoretical," Matthew says. "The physics don't work." "Did 2 years ago," Fletcher concedes. "Not anymore." "Why do you think we're so interested in the uranium extracting plants?" "The Army needs refined uranium. Lots of it, and your Phase 3 specimens could increase production tenfold." "Dear God," Miller whispers from the driver's seat. The truck emerges from the creek bed, climbing back onto the prairie. The pursuing headlights are nowhere to be seen, but none of the truck's occupants take comfort in this temporary reprieve. "We need to reach Sarah's farm," Matthew says after a long silence. "If Robert found evidence linking Pegasus to this Manhattan project, that's our leverage." "Leverage for what?" Fletcher scoffs. "Against the United States government. In case you've forgotten, Lieutenant, there's a world war brewing. Germany and Japan aren't playing by gentlemen's rules, neither can we. There are lines that shouldn't be crossed." Matthew responds, his voice hard. "Even in war." The remainder of the night passes in tense silence as Miller navigates the labyrinth of unmarked farm roads. They stop once to refuel from a spare can in the truck bed, then continue eastward. The vast landscape gradually transforms as they drive, from Matthew's relatively intact farmland to areas more severely ravaged by the Dust Bowl. Dawn breaks over a desolate panorama, fences half buried in drifting soil, abandoned farmhouses with broken windows like hollow eye sockets, fields once fertile, now barren expanses of dust and dying vegetation. The American heartland is dying before their eyes. 2 miles ahead," Sarah says quietly, pointing to a windbreak of skeletal trees on the horizon. "That's the boundary of our property." As they approach, the devastation becomes more personal for Sarah. The farm where she built a life with Robert stands in ruins. The house remains, but the outbuildings show damage from neglect and dust storms. A foreclosure notice is still nailed to the front door, flapping in the morning breeze. "Stop here," she instructs as they reach the edge of the property. "They might be watching the house." Miller pulls the truck behind a dilapidated barn out of sight from the main road. Matthew surveys the area through a pair of military-issue binoculars. No vehicles visible, no fresh tire tracks. He lowers the binoculars, but that doesn't mean they're not here. "What exactly are we looking for?" Miller asks. "Robert's evidence." Sarah replies, her eyes fixed on the farmhouse in the distance. "He was methodical, kept everything documented. If he found a connection between Project Pegasus and this Manhattan project, he would have recorded it. And hidden it where only you could find it," Matthew adds. He turns to Fletcher. "You're staying here with Doc. If we're not back in 30 minutes or if trouble shows up, get out of here." "And go where exactly?" Fletcher asks dryly. "There's a contact in Oklahoma City," Matthew tells Miller. "James Harrison, former colonel, now teaches at the university. Tell him Pegasus has broken its tether. He'll understand." Miller nods grimly, taking Matthew's pistol to keep Fletcher covered. 30 minutes, not a second more. Matthew and Sarah set out across the open field, keeping low and using what little cover the blighted landscape provides. They move with purpose but caution, scanning for any sign of surveillance. The farmhouse looms larger as they approach, a modest 2-story structure with a wraparound porch now partially collapsed on one side. To Sarah, it's a ghost of the home she once knew, familiar, yet fundamentally altered by absence and decay. They enter through the back door, which hangs loosely on broken hinges. Inside the house bears evidence of a thorough search. Furniture, overturned floorboards, pried up walls damaged where someone looked for hidden compartments. They were thorough, Matthew observes, surveying the destruction. Sarah moves through the rooms with a mixture of grief and determination. Robert wouldn't hide anything in obvious places. He was cleverer than that. She leads him to what was once their bedroom. The mattress has been slashed open, dresser drawers emptied onto the floor. She kneels beside the cast iron bed frame, running her fingers along its underside until she finds what she's looking for, a small irregularity in the metal. "Help me move this," she instructs. Together they shift the heavy bed frame. Sarah presses the hidden catch, and a small section of the iron tubing swings open, revealing a hollow interior. From this hiding place, she extracts a oilskin-wrapped package the size of a cigar box. "Robert was a surveyor before we married," she explains, carefully unwrapping the package. "He learned to waterproof field notes. Inside lies a leather-bound journal, similar to Matthew's, along with several folded maps and a small metal key." "This isn't all of it," Sarah says, flipping through the journal. "These are just his initial notes. He mentioned a full report." "Where would he keep that?" Sarah thinks for a moment, then her eyes widen with realization. "The survey markers. Robert placed boundary markers around our property when we first bought it. He made them himself. Hollow metal tubes sunk into concrete. Perfect waterproof containers." Matthew nods appreciatively. "How many markers?" "4, one at each corner of the property. We don't have time to check them all. Which one would he use?" Sarah closes her eyes, thinking like her husband. "The northwest corner. It's marked by 3 cottonwood trees. It was our special place." They leave the house as cautiously as they entered, now burdened with the precious journal. The morning sun climbs higher, burning away the early mist and illuminating the devastated landscape in harsh detail. The walk to the northwest corner of the property takes 15 precious minutes. The 3 cottonwood trees stand like sentinels, their leaves long-gone branches reaching skyward like supplicating arms. At their base, partially buried by drifting soil, a metal survey marker protrudes, a simple cylinder topped with a brass cap. Matthew keeps watch while Sarah digs away the accumulated dust with her hands. The marker is set in concrete, as she remembered, but designed to unscrew at the top. The brass cap resists at first, then yields to her determined grip. From the hollow interior, she withdraws a metal tube sealed with wax. Inside is a thick document wrapped in oilskin, along with several photographic negatives, and a small vial containing what appears to be seeds. "We need to get back," Matthew urges, checking his pocket watch. "We've been gone 25 minutes already." As they start back toward the truck, the distant sound of engines shatters the morning quiet. Not from the direction of the truck, but from the main road to the east. Down. Matthew pulls Sarah into a shallow irrigation ditch as a convoy of 3 military trucks appears on the horizon, heading directly toward the farmhouse. "Army," Matthew identifies them, his expression grim. "Not FBI, this just got more complicated." They watch as the trucks stop near the house. A dozen soldiers disembark, led by a tall figure in an officer's uniform. Even from a distance, their methodical deployment suggests a thorough search operation. "We can't go back the way we came," Sarah whispers. "They'll see us." Matthew studies the terrain, formulating options. "We need to circle around to the south, use those dead fields for cover." They begin a painstaking detour, crawling through withered cornfields when necessary, freezing in place when soldiers venture too close. The precious documents are secured inside Sarah's shirt, the vial of seeds in Matthew's pocket. After an agonizing 40 minutes, they finally reach the dilapidated barn where they left Miller and Fletcher. The truck is gone. "They followed protocol," Matthew says, surveying the area from behind the barn's corner. "The question is whether they got away clean." A weathered tractor with flat tires sits abandoned behind the barn. Matthew examines it quickly. Engines probably seized, but the fuel tank might still have gasoline. He works to detach the fuel line while Sarah keeps watch. The soldiers continue their methodical search of the farmhouse and surrounding buildings, gradually expanding their perimeter. "They'll reach us within 20 minutes, she warns. Matthew successfully drains a small amount of fuel into an old can. Not enough to get us far, but maybe enough to create a diversion. He soaks his handkerchief in the gasoline, then looks to the eastern fields where drought-killed wheat stands like kindling. "Fire spreads fast in these conditions," he explains. "It'll draw their attention east while we head west. You're going to start a fire in the Dust Bowl. Controlled, just enough smoke to create confusion." He meets her concerned gaze. "I don't like it either, but we're running out of options." He moves to the edge of the field, waiting for the soldiers to concentrate their search on the northern outbuildings. When the moment is right, he lights the gasoline-soaked cloth and tosses it into the dead wheat. The dry stalks catch immediately, the smoke rising in a thin column. They retreat quickly to the western boundary of the property, keeping low. Behind them, shouts of alarm rise as the soldiers spot the smoke. The diversion works. The search party converges on the small blaze, allowing Matthew and Sarah to slip away undetected. They continue westward across the barren landscape, the sun now high overhead beating down with merciless intensity. There's no shelter from the heat, no water, and no clear destination. Just the vital need to put distance between themselves and their pursuers. What was in Robert's report? Matthew asks as they walk, hoping the information justifies their desperate situation. Sarah retrieves the document from inside her shirt, unfolding it carefully as they continue moving. It's addressed to someone named Oppenheimer, J. Robert Oppenheimer. Matthew stops abruptly. Oppenheimer, the physicist from Berkeley. You know him? By reputation, brilliant theoretical physicist. What would he have to do with Project Pegasus? Sarah scans the document quickly. Robert, my Robert, discovered that the Phase 3 plant specimens were being modified for a new purpose. The original design extracted trace metals from soil for agricultural analysis, but these new variants were specifically engineered to accumulate uranium. For this Manhattan project Fletcher mentioned, Matthew concludes grimly, there's more. Robert found shipping manifests showing tons of processed ore being transported to secret facilities in Tennessee and New Mexico, all under military supervision, all off the official record. Matthew takes the document, reading it with growing concern. According to this, they're building something that makes conventional weapons look like firecrackers, a bomb powerful enough to level an entire city. Is that even possible? Theoretically, Einstein's work on mass energy equivalence suggests it, but the practical application was thought to be decades away. Matthew continues reading. Robert was tracking the supply chain. That's how he connected everything back to Project Pegasus and the uranium extracting plants. And that's why they killed him, Sarah says quietly. He knew too much. The sound of aircraft interrupts their conversation, a small reconnaissance plane circling in the distance. Whether searching for them or the missing FBI agent is impossible to determine, but its presence confirms the escalating scale of the manhunt. We need to find shelter. Matthew decides, surveying the desolate landscape. Somewhere to regroup and plan our next move. There's an abandoned civilian conservation corps camp about 5 miles west, Sarah suggests. Robert surveyed it before the government shut it down last year. Might still have some supplies. They alter their course accordingly, walking with renewed purpose despite their growing exhaustion. The documents they carry now feel heavier with the weight of their implications. By mid-afternoon, they reach the abandoned CCC camp, a collection of weathered wooden buildings arranged around a central parade ground. Signs of hasty departure are everywhere, tools left to rust, half-finished erosion control, projects abandoned. They approach cautiously, checking for any signs of recent occupation. The camp appears deserted, forgotten by the government that created it as an answer to the ecological and economic disaster of the Dust Bowl. Inside the mess hall, they find basic supplies, canned goods, medical kits, and most importantly, water. Sarah tends to their immediate needs, while Matthew studies Robert's documents more thoroughly. Your husband did remarkable work connecting these dots, he says, spreading the papers across a dust-covered table. The uranium extraction, the processing facilities, the theoretical calculations for a nuclear chain reaction. It's all here. Robert was methodical, Sarah replies, a hint of pride mixing with her grief. Once he focused on something, he wouldn't let go. That focus got him killed. Matthew looks up from the documents. The question is, what do we do with this information now? Expose it, surely, if they're building a weapon this destructive in secret. It's not that simple. Matthew paces the length of the mess hall. If this Manhattan Project is real, it's the biggest military secret in American history, and possibly our only answer to whatever Hitler's scientists are developing in Germany. You think the Germans are building the same thing? I don't know, but if they are and we expose the Manhattan Project, he leaves the implications hanging in the air between them. Sarah studies him, seeing the conflict etched in his features. So we do nothing. Let Robert's death mean nothing. I didn't say that. Matthew returns to the table. We need leverage, a way to ensure the agricultural applications of Project Pegasus are developed alongside the military ones. That's what your husband wanted. That's what I want. And how do we get that leverage when the entire United States Army is hunting us? Before Matthew can answer, a noise from outside freezes them both, the unmistakable sound of a vehicle approaching. They move quickly to the windows. A battered pickup truck rumbles into the camp, dust billowing behind it. Miller is behind the wheel alone. Matthew signals Sarah to stay inside while he goes to meet the doctor, gun drawn just in case. They converse briefly, then Matthew waves Sarah out. Miller's expression is grim as she approaches. "Where's Fletcher?" she asks, noting the agent's absence. "Had to leave him behind," Miller replies, his voice tight with stress. "Army patrol caught up to us about 10 miles from your farm. Fletcher tried to signal them. I managed to get away in the confusion, but they got him. Which means they know exactly where we were headed and what we were looking for," Matthew concludes. "We need to move." "Did you make contact with Harrison?" Miller shakes his head. "Phone lines are being monitored. Couldn't risk it." "Then we go to him directly. Oklahoma City." "That's 150 miles, Sarah objects, in a truck that's already running on fumes." "We'll find fuel," Matthew says with quiet determination. Those documents and the seed samples are too important to fall back into military hands. They quickly gather the supplies from the mess hall, loading them into Miller's truck. As they prepare to depart, Sarah notices Matthew's distant expression. "What is it?" "Something's not adding up," he admits. "The military response is too massive for a simple case of stolen research materials. Even with the Manhattan Project connection. Maybe they're afraid we'll expose them." "Maybe," but his tone suggests he's not convinced. "Or maybe there's something in these documents even I don't understand yet." They depart the CCC camp as the sun begins its westward descent, casting long shadows across the ravaged landscape. Miller drives cautiously, staying on minor roads while Matthew navigates, and Sarah continues studying Robert's documents. Robert mentions something called Seed Bank Alpha repeatedly. She notes flipping through the pages, says it's the original repository for all Project Pegasus specimens, including the Phase 3 uranium extractors. "That would have been at Camp Dietrich in Maryland," Matthew replies. "Army's biological research facility." "No, according to this, it was relocated in 1935 to a secure facility near—" She squints at the faded writing. "Los Alamos, New Mexico." Matthew takes the document, reading the passage himself. "That can't be right. Los Alamos was just a boys' ranch in 1935. Not according to these shipping manifests. The entire seed bank was transported there under heavy guard." Miller glances over from the driver's seat. "Los Alamos. That is where they're building the physics laboratory for the Manhattan Project. Been construction going on there for months." The pieces suddenly align in Matthew's mind. They're not just using the plants to extract uranium from ore. They're integrating Project Pegasus directly into the Manhattan Project. "What does that mean exactly?" Sarah asks. "I'm not sure." Matthew studies the documents with growing concern. But combining advanced biological engineering with nuclear physics, the implications are staggering. As evening approaches, they stop at an abandoned gas station to siphon fuel from the underground tanks. The rural station has been closed for months, another casualty of the economic collapse, but its pumps might still hold enough gasoline to extend their journey. While Miller works on the pumps, Matthew takes the opportunity to examine the vial of seeds from Robert's hidden cache. Each seed is smaller than a grain of rice, dark and unremarkable to casual observation. "These don't look like any Project Pegasus specimens I've ever seen," he tells Sarah, holding the vial up to the fading light. Robert's notes mention they're from something called Phase 4, experimental hybrids developed after you left the project. Phase 4 wasn't even theoretical when I was involved. Matthew's expression darkens. "What exactly was your husband working on before he contacted me?" "He was conducting soil surveys for the Department of Agriculture," Sarah replies. "At least that's what he told me. His work took him all over the Southwest, including New Mexico." She nods slowly as the implications sink in. "He was there just 2 months before he died." Miller approaches, wiping his hands on a rag. "Got about 3 gallons. Won't get us to Oklahoma City, but might reach Guymon. There's people there who'll help us." They continue their journey as darkness falls, the truck's headlights cutting a narrow path through the night. The roads are mercifully empty. Few civilians travel after dark in regions where the Dust Bowl has made navigation treacherous. Sarah dozes fitfully against Matthew's shoulder, exhausted by the day's events. Miller drives with the focused concentration of a man who knows their lives depend on his vigilance. "You really think Harrison will help us?" Miller asked quietly, not wanting to wake Sarah. "If anyone can, it's him." James was the conscience of Project Pegasus, argued against military applications from the beginning. And they listened to him. Matthew's laugh is without humor. They transferred him to academic research, effective way to silence dissent while keeping his brain available if needed. "What's our end game here, Matthew?" "We can't run forever." "We're not running. We're gathering ammunition for a fight." Matthew looks down at the sleeping Sarah. "Robert Caldwell died trying to expose the truth. We owe it to him to finish what he started. Even if it means undermining our own country's defense, truth isn't undermining anything. If this weapon is as powerful as these documents suggest, the world deserves to know it exists." They lapse into silence, each man lost in his own thoughts as the truck continues eastward through the night. Around midnight, they cross into the Oklahoma Panhandle, the landscape unchanged by the invisible boundary. A soft orange glow appears on the horizon ahead, the lights of Guyman, their temporary destination. As they approach the town, Matthew gently wakes Sarah. "We'll stop here for a few hours," he explains. "Rest, get supplies, then continue to Oklahoma City." The small prairie town is mostly dark at this late hour, with only a few establishments showing signs of life. Miller navigates to a modest hotel on the outskirts, parking in the shadows behind the building. "I know the owner," he explains. "Treated his wife's tuberculosis years ago. He won't ask questions." The hotel owner indeed asks no questions when Miller rouses him, merely providing a key to a back room and accepting payment in cash. The room is simple but clean. 2 beds, a wash basin, faded curtains that have weathered decades of harsh prairie sun. They take turns freshening up, the luxury of clean water and soap a momentary respite from their fugitive status. Sarah changes into fresh clothes provided by the hotel owner's wife, her dust-covered garments exchanged for a simple dress that almost fits. As Matthew washes dust and sweat from his face, he studies his reflection in the spotted mirror. The man looking back at him seems older than his 45 years, the weight of decisions past and future etched in the lines around his eyes. For 10 years, he's lived in self-imposed exile, tending his farm and quietly distributing his drought-resistant seeds to neighbors in need. He believed that small act of defiance was enough, his personal atonement for involvement in a project that crossed ethical boundaries. Now he finds himself thrust back into a world of military secrets and government conspiracies carrying information that could change the course of history. And beside him, a woman who's lost everything yet refuses to surrender to grief or fear. When he emerges from the washroom, Sarah is spreading Robert's documents across one of the beds, organizing them into coherent sections. Miller has gone to secure food and additional supplies. "I've been thinking," Sarah says without looking up, "these shipping manifests have names, dates, locations. If we could get them to a newspaper." "No newspaper would touch this," Matthew interrupts gently. "They'd turn the documents over to the government immediately." "Then we need someone with authority who can't be silenced. A senator, perhaps. In wartime, they'd be labeled traitors for questioning a military project." Sarah looks up, frustration evident in her eyes. "So what's your solution? We can't just sit on this information." Matthew sits beside her on the bed, careful not to disturb her organized documents. "Harrison has connections to civilian oversight committees. If anyone can navigate these waters safely, it's him." Sarah studies him, sensing there's more he isn't saying. "You don't fully trust him either, do you?" "I trust his principles, but he's still part of the establishment." "Then why go to him at all?" "Because we need allies, Sarah. And sometimes you have to trust someone enough to risk being wrong." Their conversation is interrupted by Miller's return. He carries a bundle of food and a worried expression. "Town's crawling with military police," he reports quietly. "Not looking for us specifically, far as I can tell, but they're setting up checkpoints on all roads leading east." "They're creating a perimeter," Matthew concludes. "Tightening the noose. We need a different route to Oklahoma City." "There's a livestock train that passes through at dawn," Miller suggests. "Head southeast toward Oklahoma City. Not comfortable, but it might get us past the checkpoints." Matthew nods his approval of the plan. "We'll rest in shifts. 2 hours each, then we move." As Miller takes the first watch, Matthew and Sarah try to get some sleep, each claiming one of the narrow beds. Despite her exhaustion, Sarah finds sleep elusive, her mind racing with the implications of all they have discovered. Matthew, she whispers into the darkness, do you ever regret leaving Project Pegasus walking away when you did? There's a long silence, and she thinks perhaps he's already asleep. Then his voice comes low and reflective. I regret not doing more to stop what it became, not seeing the potential for misuse earlier. He shifts in the darkness. Your husband saw it clearly, had the courage to act when it counted. He always said one person could make a difference, even against impossible odds. Her voice catches slightly. I thought it was just idealism. Maybe it was, but sometimes idealism is exactly what's needed. Their whispered conversation drifts into silence, each finding a measure of comfort in the other's presence as they await the coming dawn and whatever challenges it brings. The pre-dawn hours bring a new threat, not from pursuing authorities, but from the skies. A massive dust storm approaches from the west, visible as a towering black wall on the horizon, even in the dim light of early morning. We can't outrun that, Miller observes grimly as they load their few possessions into the truck. And the train will be delayed if it's as bad as it looks. We need shelter. Matthew decides studying the approaching wall of dust, somewhere to wait it out. They drive to the outskirts of town, seeking a structure substantial enough to withstand the coming onslaught. The dust storms of the 1930s are not merely inconveniences, but potential killers. Fine particles filling lungs, reducing visibility to zero, suffocating livestock and humans alike. They find refuge in an abandoned grain elevator, a concrete monolith rising above the prairie, its original purpose now irrelevant in a region where crops no longer grow. Inside, the vast, empty space echoes with their footsteps as they prepare for the storm's arrival. Matthew secures the metal door, stuffing rags into the gaps to prevent dust infiltration. Sarah organizes their supplies while Miller listens to the ancient radio he's brought from the truck, seeking weather reports or news of the manhunt. The storm hits with the force of a locomotive. The solid concrete walls of the elevator shudder under the impact of wind-driven dust. The air inside grows hazy despite their precautions, fine particles finding their way through microscopic cracks in the structure. They cover their faces with damp cloths, huddling near the center of the space where the air remains relatively clear. Outside, day turns to night as the storm blots out the sun entirely. Could last hours, Miller says, voice muffled by his makeshift mask. Might be a blessing in disguise. No one's looking for us in this. As if in answer to his observation, the radio crackles with a news bulletin, a special announcement interrupting regular programming. Through the static, they hear mentions of fugitives, military secrets, and reward for information. The manhunt has gone public. Their descriptions are being broadcast across the region. They're desperate, Matthew observes. Going public means they've lost our trail. Or they're flushing us out, Sarah counters, making it impossible for us to find help. The storm rages throughout the morning, the world outside reduced to a howling darkness, punctuated by debris striking the elevator's exterior. They use the forced delay to rest and refine their plans, studying maps of eastern Oklahoma to identify alternative routes to the capital. Robert's documents receive another thorough examination, revealing additional details about the integration of Project Pegasus into the Manhattan Project. The connection becomes clearer. The uranium extracting plants are just one component of a larger biological engineering program designed to support nuclear weapons development. It's a parallel track, Matthew explains, pointing to a diagram in Robert's notes. While the physicists work on the bomb design, the biological team is developing ways to process radioactive materials more efficiently, contain radiation, maybe even clean up after detonation. So they're trying to make nuclear weapons safer, Sarah asks. More efficient, Matthew corrects. Faster to produce, easier to deploy. And possibly with enhanced effects. Enhanced how? Matthew hesitates, reluctant to voice the darkest implications of the research. The original Project Pegasus work included studies on plant toxins that could be weaponized. Combine that knowledge with radiation effects. A radiological biological weapon, Miller concludes grimly. Christ almighty. The storm begins to abate by early afternoon, the howling wind diminishing to an occasional gust. When Matthew cracks the door to check conditions outside, a surreal landscape greets him. The town of Guymon partially buried under drifts of fine dust, cars and small structures almost completely covered. Train will definitely be delayed, Miller observes, peering over Matthew's shoulder. Tracks will need clearing. We can't wait, Matthew decides. We'll continue by truck as far as the fuel takes us, then find another way. They load their precious cargo of documents and seed samples into the truck, then carefully navigate through a town transformed into an alien landscape. The few residents who emerge from shelter are too concerned with their own situation to pay attention to three dusty travelers passing through. The road east is barely visible, covered in places by dunes of fine soil. Miller drives with extreme caution, the truck occasionally bogging down in deeper drifts. Their progress is painfully slow, but they encounter no checkpoints or patrols. The storm has temporarily suspended the manhunt. By late afternoon, they have covered barely 30 miles and the truck's fuel gauge hovers near empty. The landscape around them is desolate, even by Dust Bowl standards, the recent storm having scoured away any remaining vegetation. There's a ranch about 5 miles ahead, Sarah says, consulting the map. Or there was last time Robert surveyed this area. Might have water, maybe fuel. They continue toward this potential sanctuary, hope, mingling with caution. As they crest a low rise, a cluster of buildings appears in the distance. A ranch house barn and several outbuildings showing signs of habitation, despite the harsh conditions. Approach carefully, Matthew advises as they draw closer. Could be friendly, could be trouble. Miller stops the truck a quarter mile from the ranch, allowing them to observe before committing to contact. No vehicles are visible, but smoke rises from the house's chimney. Someone is in residence. I'll go first, Matthew decides. Less suspicious than all three of us arriving together. And if it's a trap, Sarah asks, then you and Doc head for the creek bed we passed a mile back. Hide until dark, then continue east on foot. Matthew begins the walk toward the ranch, moving openly but alertly, hands visible to show he's not an immediate threat. As he approaches, the front door of the house opens, and a figure emerges onto the porch, an elderly man holding a shotgun with casual familiarity. That's far enough, stranger, the man calls when Matthew is within speaking distance. State your business. Looking for fuel and waters, Matthew replies honestly. Got caught in the storm running low on both. The old man studies him with narrowed eyes. You alone, Matthew makes a split-second decision toward honesty. No. Wife and father-in-law back with our truck. Engines overheating. Didn't want to bring it all the way in case we weren't welcome. The old man's posture relaxes slightly, though he keeps the shotgun ready. Heard the bulletins on the radio. You ain't them fugitives they're looking for, are you? Do I look like a government scientist stealing military secrets? Matthew manages a weary smile, deflecting with partial truth. The old man chuckles dryly. Look more like a farmer down on his luck, same as the rest of us. He lowers the shotgun. Name's Harlan Wheeler. Got some water you're welcome to. Fuel's scarce, but might spare a gallon if it gets you to the next town. Appreciate it, Mr. Wheeler. I'm John Ellis. Matthew uses the alias from his backup identification. Let me signal my family to bring the truck in. Wheeler's hospitality proves genuine. He offers not only water and fuel, but a hot meal. Simple fare of beans and cornbread, but the first proper food they have had in 24 hours. His isolated ranch has become a haven of sorts, largely self-sufficient, despite the ecological disaster surrounding it. Government men been through here yesterday, Wheeler mentions as they eat at his kitchen table, asking questions, showing photographs. Offered $100 for information. Matthew exchanges a quick glance with Sarah. What kind of people were they looking for? Didn't say exactly, just persons of interest regarding national security. Wheeler shrugs. Told him I hadn't seen nobody in weeks, which was true enough then. We appreciate your discretion, Miller says carefully. Wheeler's sharp eyes move between the three of them. Don't much care for government men telling me my business. Figure if they're hunting you, you might have good reason to be running. It's an opening, an invitation for truth. Matthew weighs their options, then makes another decision toward limited honesty. We're carrying information about a secret weapons program, he admits. Information the military doesn't want exposed. Wheeler nods slowly, unsurprised. Figured it was something like that. My boy died in the Great War. Telegram said he died a hero. Letter from his buddy said he died choking on gas the generals knew was coming, but didn't warn about. His weathered face hardens. So I got no love for military secrets that cost ordinary lives. This unexpected alliance provides them not only with practical supplies, but valuable intelligence. Wheeler knows the local terrain intimately, including back roads and trails that don't appear on official maps. Railroad's your best bet for covering ground quickly. He advises spreading a hand-drawn map on the table. Freight train comes through Beaver Station tomorrow morning. Carries supplies to military installations in eastern Oklahoma. Not much security on it from what I've seen. You're taking a risk helping us, Sarah says. If they come back, been taking risks all my life, ma'am. Too old to stop now. Wheeler's eyes crinkle with a grim smile. Besides, got nothing left they can take from me. Dust got my crops banked, got my savings, war got my son. All I've got left is the choice of who to help and who to hinder. They spend the night at Wheeler's ranch resting more deeply than they have since their flight began. The old rancher stands watch, his knowledge of approaching vehicles uncanny in the vast openness of the plains. Before dawn, Wheeler drives them to Beaver Station in his own truck, a journey of nearly 20 miles across terrain impassable to their less robust vehicle. The small railway station stands abandoned. The town it once served, now a ghost of tumble-down buildings and sand-choked streets. Freight train comes through about 6, Wheeler explains, parking behind the station building, where they won't be visible from the main line. Stops for water. Engineer's name is Collins. Show him this and tell him Harlan sent you. He hands Matthew a battered silver dollar with a distinctive notch cut into its edge. You know him? Miller asks. Served together in Cuba, Spanish-American War. Wheeler's expression suggests a bond forged in experiences too complex for simple explanation. He'll understand. As the eastern sky lightens with approaching dawn, they say their goodbyes to the old rancher. His unexpected kindness, a moment of humanity in their increasingly desperate flight, strengthens their resolve to see their mission through. Good luck to you, Wheeler says, shaking each of their hands in a turn. Whatever you're carrying, make sure it was worth the cost. They watch his truck disappear back toward his isolated ranch, then settle in to wait for the freight train. The station offers minimal shelter, but provides a good vantage point to observe any approach by road. The train arrives precisely at 6, a massive steam locomotive pulling a long line of freight carriers, many bearing military markings. It stops as predicted, taking on water from the station's tower, a process that will take approximately 15 minutes. Matthew approaches the locomotive, carefully staying out of sight until he can identify the engineer. The man matches Wheeler's description. Late 60s, white beard, railroad cap, worn at a jaunty angle despite the ungodly hour. Mr. Collins, Matthew calls up to the engineer's window. The man looks down, instantly wary. Who's asking? Matthew holds up the notched silver dollar, letting it catch the early morning light. Harlan Wheeler sent us. Said you might help us reach Oklahoma City. Collins studies the coin, then Matthew's face making some internal calculation of risk and obligation. Wheeler calling in a favor after all these years must be important. National importance, Matthew confirms quietly. Collins glances toward the caboose where a brakeman is occupied with equipment checks. 2 cars back, empty supply car, doors unlocked on the far side. I don't see you, you don't see me. Understood, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Military police at the Woodward stop. Stay quiet, stay hidden. Matthew returns to Sarah and Miller, who wait with their meager possessions and precious documents. They move quickly to the indicated freight car, finding the unlocked door and climbing inside just as the locomotive's whistle signals imminent departure. The car is primarily empty except for some return supply crates stacked at one end. They conceal themselves behind these as the train lurches into motion, beginning the next leg of their journey toward Oklahoma City. As the morning progresses, the train maintains a steady pace eastward, the rhythmic clacking of wheels on rails, a hypnotic backdrop to their tense vigilance. Through small gaps in the freight car's walls, they watch the landscape gradually transform, from the dust-scoured plains of the Panhandle to the slightly more hospitable terrain of central Oklahoma. We should reach Woodward by noon, Miller estimates, checking his pocket watch. Then it's another 4 hours to Oklahoma City, assuming no delays. And assuming we get past the military police at Woodward, Sarah adds. They use the journey time to review their strategy for contacting Professor Harrison. The university campus offers both potential sanctuary and complications, public enough to deter overt military action, yet structured enough to make anonymous movement difficult. Harrison's on the physics faculty, Matthew explains. His laboratory is in the west wing of the science building. If we can reach him directly bypass department secretaries and administrative staff, we have a better chance. And if he's not there or not willing to help, then we adapt, find another way. The train begins to slow as it approaches Woodward. Through the cracks in the freight car, they observe increased activity. Multiple military vehicles parked near the station, uniformed personnel, checking each car as it passes. This isn't a random checkpoint, Matthew observes grimly. They know we might be on this train. They press themselves deeper into the shadows behind the crates as the train comes to a complete stop. Voices become audible outside, orders being given, questions asked. Footsteps move along the gravel beside the tracks, methodically approaching their hiding place. The door to their freight car slides open with a metallic groan. Sunlight slices into the dimness, accompanied by the silhouette of a military policeman. He sweeps a flashlight across the interior, the beam passing just above their huddled forms behind the crates. "Clear," he calls to someone outside, then slides the door closed again. They remain frozen in place, hardly daring to breathe until the train lurches back into motion. The inspection was cursory, either insufficient or deliberate. Matthew suspects the latter. Collins, he whispers, must have told them this car was already checked. Their relief is palpable but tempered by the realization that security will likely be even tighter at Oklahoma City. They need an alternative approach. "There's a small station about 20 miles outside the city," Miller suggests. "Edmund, less security, easier to slip away unnoticed." They agree on this modification to their plan, preparing to disembark before the train reaches its final destination. As they reorganize their possessions, Sarah makes a disturbing discovery while reviewing Robert's documents. "Matthew," she calls softly, holding a page up to the light streaming through the car's cracks. "There's something here I missed before. Look at this." He moves beside her, examining the page she indicates. It contains a technical description of the Phase 4 seed specimens, the same mysterious seeds they carry in the small vial. According to this, the Phase 4 specimens aren't just designed to extract uranium. Sarah explains, her voice tense. They're engineered to incorporate radioactive elements into their cellular structure without dying. "That shouldn't be possible," Matthew responds, taking the page for closer examination. "Radiation at those levels would destroy organic matter." Robert's notes suggest they found a way around that limitation. Something about adapting extremophile DNA, organisms that survive in toxic environments. Matthew's expression grows increasingly troubled as he reads. If they've created plants that can absorb radioactive materials without dying, they could spread radiation through conventional biological vectors. Miller finishes the thought, the doctor's scientific mind grasping the implications immediately. Wind insects, water systems. A radioactive plant that looks normal but contaminates everything around it, Sarah whispers. "Is that what's in this vial?" Matthew holds the small container up to the light, the innocent-looking seeds now transformed in their perception into something potentially monstrous. "This is what Fletcher meant about us not knowing what we were really carrying," he says quietly. "These aren't just evidence. They're the weapon itself." The revelation casts their mission in a new light. They're no longer just fugitives carrying sensitive information. They're transporting the physical embodiment of a revolutionary and terrifying new weapons technology. "If these seeds are viable," Matthew continues, "they represent something beyond even atomic weapons. A self-replicating radiological contaminant that could render entire regions uninhabitable for generations." "So the Manhattan Project isn't just building a bomb," Sarah concludes. "They're creating an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons, including biological delivery systems. And your husband discovered it all." Matthew looks at Sarah with new respect. No wonder they silenced him. The train begins to slow again as it approaches Edmond Station. Their window for disembarkation will be brief. The train won't stop completely, merely reduce speed for a curve. They gather their possessions, securing the documents in the now even more precious vial of seeds. When the train's rhythm changes, indicating the approach of the curve, Matthew slides the door open just enough for them to exit. "Ready?" he asks, meeting each of their eyes in turn. With nods of confirmation, they prepare for the jump. Another risk in a journey increasingly defined by desperate choices. As the train slows on the curve, they leap one by one into the afternoon sunlight, landing in the tall grass beside the tracks. They lie still until the train passes completely, then quickly move away from the tracks toward a stand of trees that offers concealment. From their vantage point, they can see Edmund Station in the distance, a small depot building with minimal activity. No military presence visible, Matthew observes with cautious relief, but that doesn't mean they're not in the area. How far to Oklahoma City from here? Sarah asks, brushing grass from her clothes. About 15 miles, Miller replies. We could walk it by nightfall if necessary. First, we need transportation and a secure way to contact Harrison, Matthew decides. No point reaching the city if we're arrested on arrival. They begin walking toward Edmond, staying among trees and ditches to avoid being spotted from the nearby highway. The afternoon heat is oppressive, tempered only slightly by a breeze carrying the scent of distant rain. The town of Edmond appears modestly prosperous compared to the devastated communities they've passed through. The Dust Bowl's effects less severe this far east. As they approach the outskirts, normal life continues. Children play in yards, women hang laundry, men work on automobiles or farm equipment. They pause to assess the situation, acutely aware of how out of place they must appear. Dusty, exhausted, carrying mysterious bundles. Matthew spots a small garage and filling station on the edge of town. Wait here, he instructs the others. I'll see about transportation. He approaches the garage where a middle-aged mechanic works beneath a Ford sedan. The man slides out at Matthew's approach, wiping greasy hands on an even greasier rag. Help you, he asks, eyeing Matthew's disheveled appearance with mild suspicion. Need transportation to Oklahoma City? Matthew replies directly, willing to buy rent or work for it. The mechanic studies him for a long moment. You got money or just willing hands because one's more useful than the other around here? Matthew produces several crumpled bills from his pocket, part of their dwindling emergency fund. Got some of both. The mechanic nods toward an ancient truck behind the garage. Similar to Miller's, but in even worse condition. That'll get you there if you're not in a hurry and don't mind the noise. $20. 15, Matthew counters, and you throw in a full tank of gas. They settle on $18 with half a tank, a transaction completed with minimal paperwork and no questions about Matthew's business in the capital. The mechanic even provides directions to the university that avoid main thoroughfares. Matthew returns to Sarah and Miller with their newly acquired transportation, a 1926 Ford pickup with mismatched fenders and an engine that protests loudly but functions. They load their possessions and depart Edmond without incident, taking back roads as advised. As they approach Oklahoma City, the landscape becomes increasingly urban. Evidence of the economic depression remains visible. Unemployed men congregating on street corners, makeshift settlements on the outskirts. But the devastating environmental effects of the Dust Bowl have diminished significantly. The University of Oklahoma campus rises before them in late afternoon, an oasis of academic architecture amid the city's more utilitarian structures. Red brick buildings and arranged around green quads project an atmosphere of normalcy that seems almost surreal after their desperate journey. We can't just drive up to the science building, Miller points out. Too conspicuous. There's a faculty parking area behind the physics laboratory, Matthew recalls from previous visits, less visible from the main campus. They navigate to this more secluded location, parking among other vehicles where their dilapidated truck won't immediately draw attention. The challenge now is to reach Harrison without being identified by campus security or administrative staff who might have been alerted to watch for them. Sarah and I will go, Matthew decides. Doc, you stay with the truck. Be ready for a quick departure if necessary. Miller nods his agreement, settling behind the wheel with a newspaper to appear as a driver, simply waiting for passengers. Matthew and Sarah approach the physics building from the rear entrance, carrying only the most essential documents in the vial of seeds. They've made minimal efforts to improve their appearance, but still look noticeably travel-worn compared to the faculty and students they pass. The laboratory wing is relatively quiet at this late hour. Most classes concluded, only dedicated researchers still at work. They move purposefully down the corridor, following signs toward the experimental physics section where Harrison's laboratory should be located. A nameplate on a door confirms they've found the right place. Professor James Harrison, Ph.D., Particle Physics Laboratory. Matthew knocks firmly, receiving no immediate response. He tries the handle, locked. He might be in the faculty lounge, Matthew suggests, or gone for the day. As they consider their next move, a voice behind them asks, "Can I help you find someone?" They turn to face a young graduate student carrying a stack of research papers. Professor Harrison, Sarah replies smoothly. We have an appointment. The student looks dubious. He left about an hour ago for the faculty meeting. Should be in the administration building until 5. They thank him and retreat, now faced with a new complication. The administration building will be more populated, security likely more vigilant. We need to intercept him between the meeting and his car. Matthew decides as they exit the physics building. Where would faculty typically park? There, Sarah indicates a small lot visible across a grassy quad. I see reserved signs on those spaces. They position themselves on a bench with a clear view of both the administration building's main entrance and the faculty parking area. The waiting is tense each passing minute, increasing the risk of discovery. Finally, at precisely 5 o'clock, faculty members begin emerging from the administration building. Matthew recognizes Harrison immediately, tall, distinguished with silver hair, and the same military bearing he remembered from their Project Pegasus days despite the intervening years. Stay here, Matthew instructs Sarah. If anything goes wrong, return to Miller in the truck immediately. He approaches Harrison as the professor walks toward the parking lot, timing his intercept to occur away from other faculty members. Harrison doesn't notice him until Matthew speaks his name. James. Harrison turns, his expression shifting rapidly from professional politeness to shock as he recognizes Matthew despite the years and current dishevelment. Hargrove. My God. He glances around quickly, then lowers his voice. You shouldn't be here. They're looking everywhere for you. I know, but we need to talk about Project Pegasus and what it's become. Harrison's face pales slightly. Not here. My car. They walk to Harrison's vehicle, a well-maintained Buick sedan. Matthew signals Sarah to join them. Harrison looks alarmed at the addition, but opens the rear door for her before ushering Matthew into the passenger seat. You're both taking an enormous risk coming here, Harrison says as he starts the engine. The FBI briefed university administration this morning. They're expecting you might try to contact me. Then we don't have much time, Matthew acknowledges. We have documentation about the integration of Project Pegasus into the Manhattan Project, specifically the Phase 4 biological uranium processors. Harrison's hands tighten on the steering wheel. Where did you get that information? Robert Caldwell, Sarah interjects from the back seat. My husband, before they killed him. Harrison drives in silence for several moments, processing this information. I'm taking us somewhere we can talk safely, but I need to know exactly what you're carrying and what you intend to do with it. Matthew produces the vial of seeds, Phase 4 specimens, and complete documentation of their development capabilities and military applications. The professor's expression grows increasingly grave as Matthew summarizes their discoveries: the uranium-extracting plants, the radiation-resistant hybrids, the potential for weaponization beyond conventional nuclear bombs. You understand what you're interfering with, Harrison says finally. The Manhattan Project is the single most important military research program in American history. We understand it's a nuclear weapons program, Matthew confirms. What we don't understand is why it needs a biological component capable of spreading radiation contamination across entire ecosystems. Harrison pulls into the driveway of a modest suburban home, cutting the engine before turning to face them directly. Because dropping a bomb isn't enough, he says quietly. Not if you're trying to end the most destructive war in human history. What are you saying, Sarah asks. I'm saying the choices are impossible. Intelligence suggests the Japanese will never surrender conventionally. Every island costs thousands of American lives. An invasion of the mainland would cost millions, Japanese and American. Harrison's academic demeanor cracks, revealing the military man beneath. The project isn't just building a bomb. It's building a deterrent so terrible no one will risk facing it a second time. And the Phase 4 plants, Matthew presses. Insurance. If the bomb doesn't force surrender, the next phase would be radiological contamination of agricultural regions. Starvation as motivation where destruction failed. The clinical description of such horrors leaves them momentarily speechless. Harrison uses their silence to continue his explanation. I opposed it from the beginning. Argued that the bomb alone was sufficient, that biological delivery systems crossed a moral line even war shouldn't breach. He exhales heavily. I lost that argument. So you know about all of this, Sarah says, accusation creeping into her tone. You're part of it. I'm part of the oversight committee precisely because I opposed it. Harrison corrects. Someone needs to be the voice of restraint even when that voice is ignored. And now, Matthew asks, now that we've brought you proof of how far the project has gone, Harrison studies them both weighing options and consequences with the calculation of a man accustomed to impossible choices. Now we need to decide what serves the greater good, he says finally. Exposure leverage or something else entirely. He leads them into his home where the real negotiation and the next crucial phase of their journey will begin. The future of their evidence, potentially the future of warfare itself, hangs in the balance of the coming conversation. As they enter Harrison's home, the professor secures all doors and draws the curtains. Standard precautions that speak volumes about the sensitivity of their discussion. The interior is what one might expect of an academic bachelor. Books dominating every surface, furnishings chosen for function, rather than style walls adorned with framed equations, rather than art. We should collect your other companion, Harrison says, hanging his jacket on a wall hook. The doctor, yes, better to have everyone under one roof. Matthew nods. I'll get him. 10 minutes. Be careful, Harrison warns. They'll have people watching campus and surrounding areas. While Matthew departs to retrieve Miller and their remaining documents, Harrison offers Sarah tea, a curiously domestic gesture amid world-altering conversations. She accepts, following him to a kitchen that appears rarely used. You knew my husband, she asks as he fills a kettle. We met twice at conferences. Harrison confirms his back to her as he works. Brilliant man. Asked the kind of questions that made people uncomfortable. Questions that got him killed. Harrison turns his expression somber. Yes, and I'm genuinely sorry for that. Robert was collateral damage in something much bigger than any of us. That's what they all say. Sarah responds, an edge in her voice. The ones who make decisions that cost other people everything. Fair assessment. Harrison doesn't attempt to defend himself. I've made my share of those decisions, lived with the consequences. Not always well. This glimpse of vulnerability surprises Sarah, momentarily softening her judgment. Before their conversation can continue, they hear Matthew's return, Miller's voice accompanying his as they enter through the back door. Harrison provides a brief overview of their discussion for Miller's benefit, then leads the group to his study, where a large desk provides space to examine Roberts' documents properly. For the next hour, they review the evidence in detail, Harrison's expertise in both the scientific and military aspects providing valuable context. These Phase 4 specimens represent a fundamental breakthrough in radiobiology. Harrison explains examining the vial of seeds with professional admiration despite their terrible purpose. Plants that not only survive radiation exposure, but integrate radioactive elements into their cellular structure without mutation. Could they really contaminate entire agricultural regions? Miller asked the doctor's scientific curiosity, momentarily overriding moral concerns. Theoretically, yes. Once established, they would spread pollen containing radioactive particles, contaminate soil through root systems, transfer radiation up the food chain through insects and animals that consume them. Harrison sets the vial down carefully. An invisible, self-perpetuating disaster. And this is what our government plans to use if the atomic bomb doesn't achieve Japanese surrender. Sarah's question contains equal parts horror and disbelief. It's what certain military strategists have proposed as a contingency, Harrison clarifies. Not approved policy, not yet. That's not exactly reassuring, Matthew observes dryly. Harrison rises from the desk, pacing the length of his study. You came to me expecting what exactly? That I'd help you expose all this to the public. Take it to Congress, the newspapers. We came for the truth, Matthew replies, and to find a way to ensure this technology isn't deployed against Japan or anyone else. The truth, Harrison repeats, stopping to face them. The truth is we're in the final stages of the most destructive war in human history. The truth is we're facing an enemy that's demonstrated it will fight to the last man, woman, and child rather than surrender. The truth is that without something to break that cycle, millions more will die. So the ends justify any means, Sarah challenges. No, not any means. Harrison's voice softens. That's why I've been fighting this battle from within. Arguing for the bomb, but against the biological component. Insisting on civilian oversight of deployment decisions. How successful have you been, Matthew asks. Harrison's silence is answer enough. Then help us, Sarah urges. Help us find leverage to ensure these plants are never used. What kind of leverage could possibly... Harrison begins, but is interrupted by the shrill ring of the telephone. He crosses to answer it, his expression shifting from irritation to alertness as he listens. The conversation is brief, Harrison offering only non-committal responses before hanging up. "That was my department secretary," he informs them, his voice tight with new urgency. "FBI agents were asking for me specifically. Wanted to know if I'd had any unusual visitors today." "How long do we have?" Matthew asks, immediately shifting to tactical considerations. "Minutes, perhaps. They'll check here first." Harrison moves quickly to a bookshelf, pulling volumes aside to reveal a wall safe. "We need to secure these documents and specimens before they arrive." As Harrison works the combination lock, a new tension fills the room, the immediate threat of capture now overshadowing their philosophical debate about weapons of mass destruction. "There's a cabin," Harrison says, removing a manila envelope and keys from the safe, "in the Arbuckle Mountains, University Research Station, but officially closed for renovation. No one will look for you there." He hands the keys to Matthew. "Take my car. I'll report it stolen to support your escape." "You're helping us," Sarah asks, surprised by this sudden shift. "I'm helping the right side of this moral equation," Harrison corrects. "The Phase 4 program needs to be terminated, not deployed. But exposure isn't the answer. Not with the war still raging." "What is the answer?" Matthew presses. "Leverage, as Mrs. Caldwell suggested." Harrison indicates the manila envelope he's removed from the safe. "This contains authorization codes for the Los Alamos facility, where both the Manhattan Project and the Phase 4 biological program are headquartered. With these and your evidence, you could potentially access the central seed bank." "To what end?" "Destruction," Harrison states simply. "Eliminate the Phase 4 specimens and research material. Set the program back years, long enough for the war to end by other means." The audacity of the suggestion momentarily silences them all. Harrison isn't proposing exposure or negotiation, but sabotage, direct action against a government weapons program during wartime. "That would be treason," Miller observes quietly. "Perhaps," Harrison acknowledges, "or perhaps it's the highest form of patriotism, preventing our nation from crossing a moral line it can never uncross." Before they can debate this further, headlights sweep across the curtained windows, vehicles approaching Harrison's home. "Back door," Harrison directs urgently. "Take everything. The combination to the cabin lockbox is inside the envelope. Go now." They gather the documents and the precious vial of seeds, moving quickly toward the rear of the house. Harrison remains in his study, preparing to face the arriving agents with a plausible explanation for the visitors witnessed at the university. "James." Matthew pauses at the door. "Why trust us with this? You barely know Sarah and Miller." Harrison's smile is tired, but genuine. "I knew you in the trenches, Matthew. Knew what kind of man you were then. Some things don't change even when everything else does." It's as close to an emotional farewell as two former military men are likely to exchange. Matthew nods once, then follows the others into the gathering darkness of early evening. They circle around neighboring houses to reach Harrison's Buick, parked in a side street as a precaution. As they drive away, they glimpse men in dark suits approaching Harrison's front door, federal agents arriving just minutes too late to intercept them. "Will he be all right?" Sarah asks, watching the scene recede in the side mirror. "Harrison can handle himself," Matthew assures her, though his tone lacks complete conviction. "He has the perfect cover, the concerned scientist reporting suspicious contacts." "Unless they've been watching him already," Miller points out from the back seat, "in which case he just sacrificed himself for us." The possibility hangs heavily in the air as they navigate through Oklahoma City's evening traffic, heading south toward the Arbuckle Mountains and the sanctuary Harrison has provided. "What do we do now?" Sarah finally asks the question they were all considering. "Follow Harrison's suggestion. Try to destroy the Phase 4 program from within." "It would be a suicide mission," Miller says bluntly. "Los Alamos is one of the most secure facilities in the country, but not impenetrable." Matthew counters, his military mind already analyzing possibilities. "Not if we have valid access codes and documentation." "You're actually considering this." "I'm considering all options." Matthew's expression is resolute in the dim light of the dashboard. "What I won't consider is allowing these weapons to be deployed if there's any chance of preventing it." As they drive southward into the Oklahoma night, the weight of their decision becomes palpable. They are no longer merely fugitives seeking justice or exposure. They're potential saboteurs contemplating direct action against their own government's most secret weapons program, during wartime when such actions carry the most severe consequences. The moral complexity of their situation has deepened with each revelation. What began as Matthew's personal atonement for past involvement in questionable research has evolved into a mission with potential global implications. What started as Sarah's quest for justice for her husband has become a crusade to prevent a terrible new form of warfare. Robert would have wanted this, Sarah says softly, almost to herself. He believes some lines shouldn't be crossed no matter the justification. Even to end the war, Miller challenges gently, to save millions of lives. At what cost to our humanity, she counters. If we win using weapons that poison the earth for generations, what kind of victory is that? Their philosophical debate continues as they drive deeper into rural Oklahoma, the landscape darkening around them, stars emerging in a clear sky, untouched by the dust storms plaguing regions further west. The Arbuckle Mountains rise before them, ancient weathered peaks that barely qualify as mountains by Western standards, yet provide the isolation they desperately need. Following Harrison's detailed directions, they navigate increasingly narrow roads until reaching a secluded research cabin nestled among oak and hickory trees. The structure is rustic but solid. A large main room with scientific workbenches, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and most importantly, no neighbors for miles. Evidence of its research purpose remains in the form of geological survey equipment and botanical specimens now gathering dust during its official renovation. They secure the cabin, verifying all entrances and establishing defensive positions out of ingrained caution. Only then do they allow themselves to truly rest the accumulated exhaustion of their journey, catching up with each of them. As Miller prepares a simple meal from supplies Harrison packed in the trunk, Matthew and Sarah review the contents of the manila envelope. Access codes, facility maps, personnel schedules for Los Alamos, and one unexpected item, a letter addressed to Matthew in Harrison's precise handwriting. Matthew reads it silently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "What is it?" Sarah asks, noting his reaction. "Harrison thinks this goes beyond biological weapons," Matthew replies, handing her the letter. He believes the Phase 4 program has evolved into something called Operation Crossroads, a plan to test radiological weapons in the Pacific after Japan's defeat. Testing on what? Uninhabited islands officially, but Harrison suspects they want to study long-term radiation effects on indigenous populations in the region. Matthew's voice hardens, using them as unwitting test subjects. This new revelation, the potential for human experimentation with radiation exposure, crystallizes their moral imperative. If Harrison's information is accurate, the ethical boundaries being crossed extend far beyond the immediate necessities of warfare. "Los Alamos," Sarah says with newfound determination. "We need to get to Los Alamos." As they plan their approach to the heavily guarded research facility, a storm builds on the horizon, nature's metaphorical commentary on the gathering forces aligned against them. Lightning illuminates the cabin in brief, brilliant flashes, followed by the low rumble of distant thunder. Inside, 3 unlikely allies plot to change the course of scientific history to prevent a terrible new form of warfare from entering the world's arsenal. Their chances are slim, the risks enormous, but the stakes could not be higher. The storm arrives in full force as midnight approaches, rain lashing the cabin's windows, wind howling through the surrounding forest. But inside, a different kind of storm is brewing, one that will carry them to the heart of America's most secret military installation, where the future of warfare itself hangs in the balance. Matthew stands at the window watching lightning split the sky above the ancient mountains. The elemental display of power seems fitting, a reminder of natural forces that dwarf even humanity's most destructive creations. Yet those human creations now threaten to unleash devastation on a scale previously reserved for the gods. "Tomorrow," he says, turning back to Sarah and Miller, "we leave for Los Alamos at first light. Their most dangerous journey is about to begin." Dawn breaks over the Arbuckle Mountains with the clarity that follows a night of storms. The air smells of wet earth and pine cleansed of dust for the first time in days. Inside the research cabin, Matthew, Sarah, and Miller prepare for their most dangerous journey yet, the infiltration of Los Alamos, heart of the Manhattan Project, and home to the Phase 4 biological program. Harrison's documents have provided them with crucial intelligence shift schedules, security protocols, and most importantly, the location of the Phase 4 specimens within the sprawling facility. Their plan, refined throughout the night, is audacious in its simplicity. Use Harrison's credentials to enter the facility, locate and destroy the seed bank, then escape in the confusion. Matthew studies the facility maps one final time, committing key details to memory. The biological research wing is separate from the main physics laboratory. Less security, but still guarded. Harrison's access codes should get us through the main checkpoints. And if they've already revoked his clearance, Sarah asks the practical question that hangs over their planning. Then we adapt, Matthew replies, the soldier's pragmatism evident in his tone. But Harrison is respected, Mish, there. Unless they have direct evidence of his involvement with us, his credentials should still be valid. Miller packs a small medical kit, painkillers, bandages, and a few more specialized items that might prove useful in various scenarios. His expression reflects the gravity of what they're undertaking. "Never thought I'd be plotting sabotage against my own government," he murmurs, closing the kit with a decisive snap. "Took an oath as an army doctor to serve and protect." "We're still honoring that oath," Matthew tells him, "protecting people from a weapon that should never be used." They load Harrison's Buick with their minimal equipment, the documents secured in a hidden compartment beneath the rear seat, the vial of Phase 4 seeds carefully wrapped and placed in Matthew's breast pocket. The journey to Los Alamos will take 2 days of careful driving, avoiding main highways and checkpoints that will surely be watching for them. As they prepare to depart, Sarah pauses on the cabin's porch, gazing at the mountains rising around them. For a brief moment, she allows herself to imagine a different life, one where she and Robert might have found peace in a place like this, far from the machinations of power and the terrible science that took his life. "Ready?" Matthew asks, joining her on the porch. She nods, setting aside the futile imagining. Robert would be doing the same thing if he were here. "He is here," Matthew says quietly, "in a way that matters." They drive westward through Oklahoma into the Texas Panhandle, then north toward New Mexico. The landscape transforms gradually, from the rolling hills of eastern Oklahoma to the arid plains of Texas, and finally to the dramatic mesas and badlands of New Mexico. The Buick performs admirably despite the long journey, its powerful engine designed for the transcontinental trips of a more prosperous era. They stop only when necessary for fuel or brief rest, maintaining a vigilance born of knowing the full weight of federal resources is aligned against them. At each stop, they check newspapers for any mention of their flight or Harrison's status, finding nothing but the usual war news. Allied advances in Europe, Pacific Island battles, rationing announcements. The silence regarding their own situation is both reassuring and unnerving, suggesting either that the manhunt has been downgraded or more likely that it has become too sensitive for public disclosure. By late afternoon of the second day, they approach the outskirts of Santa Fe, the last major town before Los Alamos. The laboratory complex itself sits atop a remote mesa deliberately isolated from population centers. Originally a boys' ranch school, it has been transformed into a secret city of scientists and military personnel, all working toward the single goal of developing the atomic bomb and its associated technologies. "We'll need to split up here," Matthew decides as they pull into a small motor lodge on Santa Fe's outskirts. Too risky to approach together. They secure 2 adjacent rooms, a married couple and the wife's elderly father being an unremarkable grouping, even in these suspicious times. As darkness falls, they gather in Matthew's room for final preparations. Harrison's notes indicate a supply truck makes deliveries to the facility every morning at 0600. Matthew explains, spreading the maps across the bed. The driver has been vetted, but cargo is only superficially inspected due to volume. If Miller and I can conceal ourselves among the supplies, we can get through the main gate without using Harrison's credentials directly. "And me?" Sarah asks. "You'll drive Harrison's car in the main entrance an hour later. His status should get you past the checkpoint, especially if you present yourself as his research assistant delivering materials he forgot." Sarah's expression shows her concern. "Isn't that the riskier approach?" "Actually, no," Matthew counters. "Women are less likely to be viewed as security threats, especially in scientific settings. You'll face less scrutiny than either of us would using Harrison's credentials directly. And once we're all inside, we reconvene at the biological research wing. Your job is to locate the central filing system, find all documentation related to Phase 4, and remove or destroy it. Miller and I will access the seed bank itself. How will we communicate inside? We won't, Matthew states flatly. Too dangerous. We operate on synchronized timing only. If any of us fails to reach the rendezvous point by the designated time, the others proceed without them. The brutal practicality of this approach hangs heavily in the air. They are preparing not just for success, but for the very real possibility of capture, and the need for the mission to continue regardless of individual fate. One more thing, Matthew adds, reaching into his bag to retrieve a small metal canister. Thermite, military grade, generates heat up to 4,000 degrees, hot enough to destroy any organic material, completely including the seeds. Miller eyes the canister with professional concern. That's essentially a weapon, Matthew. It's insurance. The Phase 4 specimens need to be eliminated beyond any possibility of recovery. This is the only certain method. None of them speaks the obvious, that using such a device within a government facility crosses the line from sabotage to something far more aggressive. Yet the nature of their target justifies extreme measures in ways conventional sabotage might not. As they complete their preparations, Sarah retrieves Robert's journal from her bag, the personal record of his investigation that accompanied his more formal documentation. "There's something here I've been meaning to show you," she says, opening the journal to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "Robert made a final entry the night before he died. I haven't shared it because, well, it felt too personal, but you should know this before tomorrow." Matthew takes the journal, reading the entry Sarah indicates. Robert's handwriting, normally precise, shows signs of haste or agitation. "Emma Hargrove confirmed my suspicions today. The original Project Pegasus has evolved far beyond agricultural applications. What began as drought-resistant crops has become a delivery system for radioactive material, plants engineered to concentrate radiation in their tissues without dying. But there's more, something even Hargrove doesn't know. I've traced shipping manifests from Los Alamos to Camp Dietrich. They're combining the radiation-resistant plant genetics with bacterial agents, potentially creating organisms that could spread radiation contamination through infectious disease vectors. This isn't just a weapon of mass destruction. It's a doomsday device that could render entire continents uninhabitable for generations. I've documented everything and hidden the evidence where Sarah will find it if necessary. Tomorrow I'll confront Peterson with what I know. God help us all if I'm right." Matthew looks up from the journal, his expression grave. "Peterson, who's Peterson?" "I don't know," Sarah admits. "Robert never mentioned that name to me." "Tomorrow would have been the night he died," Miller observes quietly. The implication is clear. Robert's planned confrontation with the mysterious Peterson likely precipitated his murder. This new information adds both urgency and complexity to their mission. The Phase 4 program may be even more advanced and dangerous than they had realized. "Get some rest," Matthew advises, his tone betraying the tension they all feel. "Tomorrow we'll test everything we have." The night passes with little actual sleep for any of them. The weight of the coming day, its dangers, and its historical significance keeps rest at bay despite their physical exhaustion. By 5 a.m., they're already preparing for departure, checking weapons, reviewing maps one final time. Matthew and Miller leave first, taking a taxi to the supply depot where the Los Alamos delivery truck will be loaded. Their plan to stow away among the cargo is fraught with risk, but offers the best chance of undetected entry. Sarah will follow later with Harrison's car and credentials, approaching through the main gate as planned. The pre-dawn air carries a chill that penetrates their light clothing as they wait near the depot. Activity begins precisely on schedule. Workers arriving, the large truck backing up to the loading dock, crates and boxes being transferred efficiently under the supervision of a foreman checking items against a manifest. When the workers break for coffee, Matthew and Miller make their move, slipping from the shadows to conceal themselves among stacks of laboratory equipment bound for the physics division. The space is cramped, uncomfortable, and entirely exposed should anyone conduct more than a cursory inspection. The truck departs for Los Alamos at 5:45 a.m., right on schedule. The journey up the winding road to the mesa takes approximately 30 minutes, during which Matthew and Miller remain perfectly still, despite the truck's jarring progress over unpaved sections. At precisely 6:15 a.m., the truck stops at the main security checkpoint. Through a small gap between crates, they observe the guards approach. Military police with sidearms visible, expressions professionally neutral as they examine the driver's credentials. Special delivery today, the guard asks, noting the unusual quantity of equipment. New spectrometers for Oppenheimer's team. The driver replies casually, plus the usual supplies. Need to take a look, the guard announces, moving toward the rear of the truck. Matthew and Miller press themselves deeper into the shadows as the truck's rear doors swing open. Flashlight beams sweep across the cargo, pausing occasionally on particular crates. The inspection is thorough but focused primarily on the sealed containers rather than the spaces between them. After what seems an eternity, the doors close again. The truck lurches forward, continuing its journey into the heart of the world's most secret scientific installation. The Los Alamos Laboratory Complex sprawls across the mesa top, a hastily constructed city of identical buildings, security fences, and bustling activity, even at this early hour. Scientists and military personnel move with purpose between buildings, the disparate elements of the Manhattan Project operating in parallel toward their shared terrible goal. The truck stops at a loading dock attached to the main physics laboratory. As workers begin unloading, Matthew and Miller seize a moment of distraction to slip from their hiding place, moving with deliberate casualness toward a side entrance as if they belong there. Harrison's intelligence proves accurate. The side door requires an access code which Matthew enters from memory. The door opens with a soft click, admitting them to a utilitarian corridor lined with offices and smaller laboratories. They navigate through the building using the memorized floor plan, avoiding major thoroughfares and administrative areas where they might be questioned. Their destination, the Biological Research Wing, occupies a separate building on the eastern edge of the complex. Meanwhile, Sarah approaches the main gate in Harrison's Buick, heart pounding, despite her outwardly calm demeanor. She has dressed the part of an academic assistant, hair pulled back, severely reading glasses perched on her nose, a stack of folders on the passenger seat beside her. Identification, please, the gate guard requests as she stops at the checkpoint. I'm Professor Harrison's research assistant. She explains, presenting his credentials along with a visitor's pass Harrison had included in his materials. He sent me to deliver these documents to Dr. Lawrence in the physics division. The guard examines the credentials carefully, comparing the visitor's authorization to a clipboard of approved personnel. Professor Harrison isn't scheduled to be on site today. No, sir, that's why he sent me. Sarah offers an apologetic smile. He was called to Washington unexpectedly. These calculations couldn't wait for his return. The guard hesitates, then picks up a telephone. Sarah's pulse quickens as he speaks quietly into the receiver, presumably verifying her story. After a brief conversation, he replaces the handset. You are cleared for Building C only, Dr. Lawrence's office. He returns a Harrison's credentials along with a visitor's badge. Display this at all times. Do not enter any areas marked restricted. Vehicle is subject to search upon exit. Of course. Thank you. The gate rises, allowing her to proceed into the complex. The first and potentially most difficult hurdle has been cleared, though she knows greater challenges await. She navigates to the designated parking area, mind racing with the contingency plans, should Matthew and Miller have failed to gain entry. Inside the Biological Research Wing, Matthew and Miller move with greater caution. This area houses not only the Phase 4 program, but other biological warfare research, making security considerably more stringent. Laboratory staff in white coats pass them, occasionally too focused on their own work to question the presence of unfamiliar faces. According to Harrison's information, the Phase 4 seed bank is located in a climate-controlled vault in the building's basement level. They locate the stairwell and descend, finding the lower level remarkably unoccupied, either by design or fortunate coincidence. Most staff rotate to upper laboratories during morning hours, Miller whispers, recalling Harrison's notes. Vault should be minimally monitored until the afternoon shift. The vault itself presents their first major obstacle, a heavy metal door with both combination and key locks. Harrison's credentials include the combination but not the key, which would be held only by senior project personnel. Matthew studies the lock mechanism, recognizing it as a standard military design. I can pick this, he murmurs, producing thin metal tools from his pocket. Need 3 minutes. Miller keeps watch while Matthew works on the lock, his expertise born of specialized training during his intelligence service. The lock yields after precisely 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the heavy door swinging open silently on well-oiled hinges. The vault interior is unexpectedly spacious, a climate-controlled laboratory rather than merely storage. Shelves line the walls holding hundreds of carefully labeled specimen containers. In the center, sophisticated microscopes and testing equipment surround a large work table covered with notes and experimental apparatus. This is far more advanced than anything we had during my time with Pegasus. Matthew observes, scanning the equipment with professional assessment. They've accelerated the program significantly. Miller examines the specimen shelves, locating the Phase 4 section according to the classification system outlined in Harrison's documents. Here, the radiation-resistant strain specimens. The seeds are stored in sealed glass containers, each marked with detailed information about radiation, absorption, capacity, growth rates, and contamination potential. Accompanying notebooks document experimental results, cold scientific language describing the plant's effectiveness as biological radiation vectors. As Matthew prepares the thermite device, positioning it for maximum destructive effect, Miller continues examining the laboratory's contents. His attention is drawn to a sealed refrigeration unit marked Crossroads, Phase 5. "Matthew," he calls softly, "look at this." And inside the refrigeration unit, they discover something far more disturbing than seeds. Vials of bacterial cultures clearly labeled as modified strains of common infectious diseases, influenza, typhoid, even pneumonic agents. Each has been engineered to incorporate the radiation resistance qualities of the Phase 4 plants. My God. Miller breathes his medical training, allowing him to grasp the full implications immediately. They've created radiation-resistant pathogens, infectious diseases that could spread radiation contamination through human populations. This is what Robert discovered, Matthew realizes. The final evolution of Project Pegasus, not just plants that carry radiation, but diseases that transmit it from person to person. The moral enormity of this discovery solidifies their resolve. This isn't merely a questionable weapons program, but a fundamental transgression of scientific ethics, research that threatens to transform conventional warfare into biologically enhanced radiological terrorism. Matthew modifies their original plan, expanding the thermite placement to ensure destruction of both the seed bank and the pathogen samples. As he works, Miller documents everything with the small camera they've brought, creating evidence of the program's existence before its destruction. At the main physics building, Sarah has successfully delivered the fictitious documents to Dr. Lawrence's office, establishing her presence as legitimate. With her official task completed, she now faces the challenge of reaching the biological wing undetected to rendezvous with Matthew and Miller. She navigates the complex, carefully using Harrison's map and her own sharp observation skills. The facility operates with the organized chaos typical of large research installations. Scientists focused on their specialized tasks, administrative staff managing the overwhelming flow of information, security personnel maintaining vigilance but familiar with the constant movement of personnel between buildings. Sarah adopts the purposeful stride of someone with clear authorization, nodding professionally to those she passes without inviting conversation. When she encounters a security checkpoint between building sections, she presents Harrison's credentials with confidence, her story about delivering additional materials to the biological division accepted without significant questioning. The biological research wing has a distinctly different atmosphere from the physics building. Fewer personnel, more rigorous containment protocols, and underlying tension evident in the staff's demeanor. Sarah locates the central records office, finding it temporarily unoccupied during the morning staff meeting noted in Harrison's schedule. Working quickly, she accesses the filing system, locating the Phase 4 documentation. The scope of the program is even more extensive than Robert's notes suggested. Detailed plans for post-war deployment, environmental impact studies coldly calculating radiation persistence in various ecosystems, even population mortality projections for targeted regions. Most disturbing are documents referring to Operation Crossroads, the planned testing of these weapons on Pacific Islands with nearby indigenous populations to be monitored for collateral exposure effects, without their knowledge or consent. Sarah photographs key documents, then systematically removes the most critical files, concealing them in her briefcase. She cannot destroy them here without drawing immediate attention, but removing them will disrupt the program significantly and provide evidence for potential future accountability. As she completes this task, an alarm suddenly blares throughout the facility, harsh and insistent. Initially fearing discovery, she quickly realizes the alarm indicates something else entirely, a containment breach in the laboratory sections. Matthew and Miller have been discovered. In the vault below, Matthew and Miller work with urgent precision to complete their sabotage. The thermite devices are positioned ready for activation when the laboratory door suddenly opens. A scientist enters, late 50s distinguished appearance, expression, shifting from surprise to recognition as he sees the intruders. "Lieutenant Hargrove," he says calmly, showing no inclination to raise an alarm. "After all these years, I wondered if you might eventually find your way here." Matthew straightens, maintaining proximity to the thermite detonator. "You have the advantage, sir." "Peterson, Dr. William Peterson. We never met formally during Project Pegasus, but I certainly knew of you." The scientist glances at the positioned thermite with professional interest rather than alarm. "I see you've discovered our latest work. What do you think of it scientifically speaking?" The name registers immediately. Peterson, the man Robert Caldwell had planned to confront the day before his death. "I think it's an abomination," Matthew replies evenly. "Science perverted to its darkest purpose." An understandable emotional reaction, Peterson acknowledges with disturbing equanimity. But short-sighted, these advances could give America an insurmountable advantage in the post-war world. Weapons so terrible they need never actually be used, merely possessed. Like the radiation-resistant pathogens, Miller interjects, medical outrage evident in his tone. Diseases engineered to spread radiation poisoning through entire populations. Precisely. Peterson seems almost pleased by Miller's comprehension. Conventional atomic weapons are crude, destroy infrastructure along with the populations. Our biological delivery systems offer targeted effects, preserving valuable resources while achieving strategic objectives. "You're talking about genocide made efficient," Matthew states flatly. Peterson shrugs. "I'm talking about the future of warfare, the logical extension of technologies already in development." He takes a step forward. "You can't stop this progress, Lieutenant. Even if you destroy this facility, the research exists elsewhere. The path has been opened." "Robert Caldwell discovered that path," Matthew says, watching Peterson's reaction carefully, "before you had him killed." A flicker of something, not quite guilt, perhaps annoyance, crosses Peterson's features. Caldwell was idealistic, naive. He couldn't grasp the greater context of our work. His elimination was regrettable but necessary for national security. "You murdered him," Miller states bluntly, "made it look like natural causes." "An accelerated case of dust pneumonia," Peterson confirms without remorse. "Ironic, really. A man dedicated to agricultural improvement killed by agricultural disaster." Sarah has made her way to the basement level following the sound of voices. She remains hidden just outside the laboratory door, hearing this confession of her husband's murder with a surge of grief and rage that threatens to overwhelm her calculated caution. "And now," Matthew asks, hand moving imperceptibly closer to the thermite detonator. "What happens now, Dr. Peterson?" "Now we come to an understanding." Peterson replies, his tone reasonable, as if discussing a minor academic disagreement. "You're intelligent men. You understand the realities of global power. Join us. Help perfect these weapons so they need never be used. Your expertise would be invaluable. The same offer you made Robert before killing him." Mr. Caldwell wasn't a scientist. He was merely an observer who saw too much. Peterson's expression hardened slightly. "You, Lieutenant Hargrove, are a creator, one of the original architects of Project Pegasus. Your place is here, continuing what you began." "What I began was meant to feed people." Matthew responds, anger finally breaking through his controlled facade. "To create crops that could survive drought and disaster, not weapons that spread poison through living systems." "A matter of application, nothing more," Peterson dismisses. "The science remains brilliant regardless of purpose." Miller has been gradually moving toward the pathogen storage unit during this exchange, positioning himself to ensure its destruction regardless of other outcomes. He catches Matthew's eye briefly, a silent communication of readiness. "I didn't come here to join you," Matthew states with quiet finality. "I came to end this program." "You can't possibly believe," Peterson begins, but is interrupted by Sarah stepping into the laboratory, Harrison's pistol steady in her hands. "You killed my husband," she says, her voice controlled despite the emotion behind it. "Robert Caldwell. You murdered him because he discovered what you were doing here." Peterson's composure falters slightly at this unexpected development. "Mrs. Caldwell, I presume. Your husband's death was unfortunate, but necessary for national security. Yes, I heard you the first time." The pistol doesn't waver. Robert believes some lines should never be crossed, no matter the justification. He died for that belief. "And you'll die for it too if you don't reconsider your actions," Peterson warns, his reasonable tone giving way to something colder. "Security already knows you're here." The alarms. As if on cue, the facility's alarm system activates its wailing urgency, confirming Peterson's claim. They have minutes at most before security forces converge on the laboratory. "It's over," Peterson states with renewed confidence. "Surrender now and perhaps arrangements can be made. Your expertise is still valuable, Lieutenant Hargrove." Matthew exchanges glances with Miller and Sarah, a lifetime of decisions condensed into a single moment. Then he reaches for the thermite detonator. "Some prices are worth paying, Doctor." Peterson lunges forward to stop him, but Sarah intercepts, forcing the scientist back at gunpoint. Matthew activates the primary thermite charge positioned among the Phase 4 specimens, while Miller simultaneously triggers the secondary device placed with the pathogen samples. The thermite ignites with blinding intensity, generating heat so extreme that glass containers shatter instantly, their contents vaporizing in the conflagration. Peterson watches in horror as years of research disintegrate before his eyes. "You fools," he shouts over the roaring flames. "You've set our defensive capabilities back a decade." "We've prevented a moral catastrophe," Miller corrects, already moving toward the exit. "There are weapons that should never exist regardless of who controls them." The fire suppression systems activate, but they're designed for conventional fires, not the mineral-fueled inferno of thermite. The blaze continues unabated, consuming specimens, research notes, and equipment with indiscriminate thoroughness. They force Peterson to accompany them as they exit the vault, using him as both hostage and guide through the increasingly chaotic facility. Emergency evacuation procedures have been initiated, scientists and support staff streaming toward designated assembly points, security personnel moving against this flow toward the source of the alarm. The northwest exit, Peterson directs, grudgingly recognizing the futile danger of resistance. Less security, more focused on containment than prevention at this point. They navigate through service corridors, the scientists walking before them under Sarah's unwavering aim. The facility's design, compartmentalized for security, now works in their favor, preventing rapid response across different sections. As they approach a service exit, Peterson suddenly speaks again, his tone almost conversational, despite the circumstances. "You know why I recognized you immediately, Lieutenant Hargrove, despite the years and changed appearance." Matthew doesn't respond, focused on scanning for security personnel ahead. "Because your brother talked about you constantly during his final days." This unexpected statement causes Matthew to falter momentarily. "I don't have a brother." "Not anymore?" Peterson agrees with clinical detachment. "Captain James Hargrove, Army Chemical Corps. Volunteered for the first Phase 3 trials in 1942. Quite the patriot, your brother. Believe completely in our work." "You're lying," Matthew states flatly, but uncertainty has crept into his voice. "James died in North Africa. Tank Division. That was the official notification, yes. His actual assignment was classified." Peterson's expression shows a calculated blend of sympathy and manipulation. "He was proud to serve as a test subject, said it was the Hargrove family tradition, advancing science for national security." Sarah watches Matthew's face register shock, then devastating comprehension. "Matthew, what is he talking about?" "My younger brother." Matthew replies, his voice hollow. "We were estranged, different views on military service, among other things. I received notification of his death 2 years ago. He suffered considerably during the final stages." Peterson continues relentlessly. "The radiation effects were more severe than our models predicted. But the data he provided was invaluable to refining the Phase 4 protections." Miller steps forward, physically placing himself between Matthew and Peterson. "Enough. This serves no purpose except cruelty." "It serves truth, Doctor," Peterson counters. "Lieutenant Hargrove should understand exactly what he's destroying. His brother gave his life to advance this research, the same research you've just reduced to ashes. The revelation lands as Peterson intended, a psychological blow more effective than any physical resistance. Matthew's expression reflects not just shock, but a profound moral recalibration. Had his brother truly volunteered? Had he died believing in the very program Matthew now works to destroy? Sarah recognizes the strategy for what it is, a final attempt to undermine their resolve to plant seeds of doubt that might later grow into regret or betrayal. Robert died to stop this too, she reminds Matthew quietly. He believed the cost was worth paying. The moment of crisis passes. Matthew's expression hardens once more, the temporary doubt subsumed by renewed certainty. If my brother died for this research, then I honor him by ensuring it was not in vain, he tells Peterson, and by allowing it to create more victims. They reach the service exit, finding it unguarded in the confusion of the facility-wide alarm. Beyond lies the perimeter fence, and beyond that, the mesa's edge dropping away to the valley below. What now? Miller asked the practical question that none of them had fully resolved in their planning. Now you surrender, Peterson suggests reasonably. You've accomplished your primary objective. The Phase 4 and V specimens are destroyed. The research is set back significantly. Accept the consequences with the same courage you've shown thus far. It's a surprisingly compelling argument, one that appeals to the military sense of honor that still guides Matthew's actions despite his opposition to the program. The likelihood of escape from Los Alamos, now on full alert, is minimal at best. There's another option, Sarah says suddenly. Harrison's final contingency. She retrieves a folded paper from her pocket, a map marked with a route leading from the facility's northwest corner down a maintenance trail to the canyon below. At the trail's end, according to Harrison's notation, waits a vehicle with supplies and documentation for new identities. Harrison anticipated success might require escape, she explains. He made arrangements. Peterson laughs softly, genuine amusement mingling with grudging respect. James Harrison, always the chess player, thinking several moves ahead. I should have watched him more carefully. They bind and gag Peterson, leaving him in a storage closet where he'll be found quickly but not immediately. Then they make their way to the perimeter fence, locating the maintenance gate Harrison had marked on his map. The gate requires a key they don't possess, but the fence itself proves scalable with effort. They climb over one by one, dropping to the dusty ground beyond, just as shouts from pursuing security echo behind them. The maintenance trail is steep and treacherous, switchbacking down the mesa's face through scrub pine and exposed rock. They descend rapidly, using the rocky terrain for cover, as figures appear at the fence above, scanning the landscape for signs of the escapees. They'll expect us to head for Santa Fe, Matthew observes, guiding them to a narrow deer path that branches from the main trail. We go west instead. The descent takes nearly an hour of difficult travel, each of them sustaining minor injuries from the rough terrain. When they finally reach the canyon floor, they're greeted by the sight Harrison promised. An old Army surplus Jeep concealed beneath a camouflage tarp, stocked with water rations and a sealed envelope containing new identification documents. Harrison risked everything for this. Miller marvels, examining the meticulous preparations. His career, his freedom. Some prices are worth paying, Sarah echoes Matthew's earlier words as they uncover the vehicle. They depart as the sun reaches its zenith, driving west along little-used logging roads that gradually connect to more established routes leading toward Arizona. Behind them, Los Alamos remains in turmoil. The biological research wing damaged beyond repair, years of morally questionable research reduced to ash. Whether they've delayed the inevitable or prevented it entirely remains uncertain. The Manhattan Project will continue, the atomic bomb still approaching its terrible birth. But the biological component, the radiation-spreading plants and pathogens that would have extended nuclear devastation across generations, has been set back critically. As afternoon fades toward evening, they stop at a high overlook with views stretching hundreds of miles across the New Mexico desert. The landscape holds both beauty and harshness, much like the choices they've made and the consequences they now face. What happens now? Sarah asks, the immediate crisis behind them, the uncertain future ahead. We disappear, Matthew replies. New identities, new locations. Harrison's provided everything we need. And the evidence we gathered, the documents proving what they were developing. Matthew considers this. the moral weight of knowledge versus the practical reality of power. We preserve it, keep it secure. If they restart the program, we'll have what we need to expose it. An insurance policy, Miller observes. Something like that, Matthew agrees. We've won today's battle. Tomorrow's may require different weapons. Sarah looks out across the desert landscape, thinking of Robert, his courage, his principles, his ultimate sacrifice. In destroying the program that killed him, she has achieved a measure of justice, though not the public kind she once envisioned. Robert would consider this enough, she says quietly. Stopping the weapon was always more important to him than punishing those responsible. Matthew places a gentle hand on her shoulder, the gesture conveying understanding beyond words. In the weeks of their desperate journey, they have moved from strangers to comrades, to something not yet defined but undeniably meaningful. Your husband was a brave man, he tells her, the kind who changes the course of history without ever appearing in its pages. As the sun sets behind distant mesas, casting long shadows across the ancient landscape, they contemplate the strange journey that brought them together. A chance encounter in a barn during a dust storm becoming the catalyst for actions that may have altered the future of warfare itself. They cannot know if they've succeeded completely. The atomic age will still dawn, the terrible power of nuclear fission unleashed upon the world. But perhaps they've prevented an even darker chapter, one where radiation spreads not just from bombs, but through the very fabric of life itself. The desert wind carries the scent of sage and pine as they prepare to continue their journey westward. Behind them lies Los Alamos, its secrets and horrors. Before them stretches an uncertain future. Fugitives from their own government keepers of knowledge too dangerous to share, but too important to forget. In the gathering dusk, Sarah thinks she sees a hawk circling high above, a solitary predator riding thermal currents with effortless grace. Like them, it navigates between earth and sky, between safety and risk, seeking its own path through the vast wilderness. They drive onward as stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Three unlikely allies bound by conscience and consequence, carrying with them both the burden of their actions and the quiet assurance of having stood against a terrible wrong. Whatever comes next, pursuit, freedom, or some complex middle ground, they have kept faith with those who sacrificed everything for a principle. In a world racing toward previously unimaginable destructive capacity, they have drawn a line that should not be crossed. Some prices are worth paying, some battles worth fighting even against impossible odds. Some victories measured not in triumph, but in terrible things prevented. As the jeep disappears into the gathering darkness, the desert reclaims its ancient silence. Witness to both the darkest and noblest aspects of human nature, keeper of secrets, both terrible and necessary, in a world forever changed by the power of the atom and the courage of those who would contain it. 20 years later, a small farm thrives in the rolling hills of western Oregon. Apple trees stand in neat rows, their branches heavy with ripening fruit. Fields of wheat wave golden in the late summer breeze. Unlike the devastated plains of the Dust Bowl era, this land speaks of renewal and careful stewardship. On the porch of a modest farmhouse, Matthew Hargrove, now known to neighbors as Michael Henderson, sits in a hand-carved rocking chair watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. At 65, his face bears the lines of a life lived fully, his hair now completely silver. Yet his eyes remain sharp, observant, carrying the watchfulness of a man who knows the true cost of vigilance. Sarah works among the beehives at the edge of the orchard, her movements deliberate and practiced. The years have treated her with a measure of kindness. The deep grief of losing Robert gradually transformed into a bittersweet memory, honored through purposeful living. She has found, if not complete peace, then a meaningful coexistence with the past. As twilight deepens, they gather on the porch with Doc Miller, now approaching 90, but still possessed of his wry humor and keen mind. Their lives have intertwined permanently since that fateful mission at Los Alamos, bound by shared danger, shared purpose, and ultimately shared exile from their former identities. The radio on the porch table broadcasts the evening news reports of Cold War tensions, nuclear proliferation, concerns the ongoing space race. The world they helped shape through their actions 2 decades ago continues its precarious balance between progress and destruction. They're testing a new nuclear submarine, Miller observes, listening to the news report. The USS George Washington, Polaris missiles with a range of 1,500 miles. The deterrence doctrine in action. Matthew responds his tone neutral. Weapons so terrible they need never be used. Peterson's argument, Sarah notes quietly, but without his biological component, Matthew reminds her, that line wasn't crossed. They sit in contemplative silence, each reflecting on the complicated legacy of their actions. The morning newspapers had carried a small obituary. Few would notice Dr. William Peterson, renowned biochemist, had died at age 75. With him dies another link to the classified program they had risked everything to stop. I received a letter from Harrison last week. Miller mentions changing the subject. He's retiring from the university, moving to Vermont, still maintaining the correspondence chain after all these years. Sarah smiles. 20 years of Christmas cards through 5 different mail drops. Harrison had survived the aftermath of their escape, his involvement never proven conclusively. He had continued his physics work, subtly guiding research away from the biological applications. They had destroyed his quiet influence, a different kind of courage than their more dramatic stand. From inside the house comes the sound of younger voices, their extended family of sorts. Children of the community who gather regularly to hear Matthew teach science and agriculture, passing on the beneficial knowledge of Project Pegasus, while instilling values that would prevent its perversion. I found Robert's journal yesterday while cleaning the attic. Sarah says, her voice soft with remembrance. His final entry, about drawing lines that shouldn't be crossed. He would be proud of what we built here. Matthew tells her gently, covering her hand with his own. This farm, the drought-resistant crops we've shared with struggling farmers, the research we've published under pseudonyms, a different legacy than the one the government envisioned for Project Pegasus, Miller adds. A better one, Matthew affirms. They have lived with the consequences of their choice, the necessity of new identities, the separation from former lives, the constant awareness that somewhere in classified files they remain fugitives who compromise national security. Yet none of them has ever expressed regret for the stand they took. True patriotism, they discovered, sometimes requires standing against your country's actions to uphold its deeper principles. Love of nation doesn't demand blind obedience, but thoughtful stewardship of its moral compass. In the distance beyond their property, car headlights appear on the rural road, visitors approaching. Perhaps neighbors, perhaps the students who will arrive tomorrow for Matthew's agricultural workshop. Or perhaps, though increasingly unlikely after 2 decades, representatives of agencies with long memories and unresolved files. Whoever it is, Matthew says, rising from his chair, they'll find just what they see, a family of farmers living honest lives. With a few interesting secrets, Miller adds with a wink, the most important secrets are safe. Sarah responds, her gaze taking in the thriving farm, living proof that knowledge meant for destruction can be redirected toward creation. As darkness settles fully over the landscape, lights appear in neighboring farms, a constellation of human endeavor stretching across the valley. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new students eager to learn, perhaps even new threats to the fragile peace they've built. The atomic age continues its uncertain progress, mankind still learning to live with the terrible power it has unlocked. But tonight on this porch, 3 unlikely heroes share the quiet satisfaction of having held a line when it mattered most. Their names will never appear in history books, their actions never acknowledged in official records. Yet the world is different, perhaps immeasurably so, because of the stand they took in a laboratory deep in the New Mexico desert 2 decades ago. Some victories remain forever unsung. Some acts of courage known only to those who perform them. Some forms of patriotism expressed not in battle against foreign enemies, but in moral stands against domestic wrongs. As stars emerge in the darkening sky, the same stars that witnessed their desperate flight from Los Alamos, they silently acknowledge the truth that has guided their lives since that pivotal moment, that ordinary people acting with extraordinary conviction can alter the course of history through choices made in obscurity, but carried forward in how they live each day that follows.